I took my brother's life here, provoked Valen's anger, abandoned the people of Zakul. I am not fit to rule. I never was.
You were following Valkorion's twisted example, but you're a better man than he ever was.
And you are even stronger. Claim the throne, Commander. You have earned it. The fleet has gone quiet.
You did it, Commander.
Well done. After years of strife, you have become Emperor of Zakul, commander of the fleet, and heir to the eternal throne.
Your family's caused enough damage. I won't let the throne fall into the wrong hands again.
Neither will I.
No!
Stop, Father!
I once offered you mercy in this very room, but you refused to bow. Now, you have no choice.
If you think I'm your puppet, but...
Bow.
As you command, my Emperor.
You're an exemplary pawn. One I forged into a vessel of supreme power, worthy of preserving my spirit. Now I take your body as my own, and rule once more as the Immortal Emperor.
You can't do this, Valkorion.
I already have. Who am I?
You're the Alliance Commander, once known as the hero of Typhon and conqueror of the Sith Emperor. You wear Valkorion's skin, but you're the same person you always were.
It's finally happened. I've gone insane.
Not yet, but that will change if you don't act. Valkorion shattered your mind and tossed you into the abyss of your psyche. He thinks you're dead, but you survived by assuming his form. Find the holocron. Save yourself. Take the holocron. Save yourself.
The Outlander's alive.
Father conquered his mind, but he's fighting back.
Look out!
You persist. Impressive.
You may take my body, but you can't have my mind.
A minor inconvenience. When you struck down Valen, I consumed her essence. Her spirit is now mine to command.
Let me go or I'll chop you into little pieces.
Submit, my child.
As you wish.
First you have me kill Valen, then you enslave her spirit.
You sound disturbed.
This is cruel, Valkorion. Even for you.
Save your judgment and prepare for your downfall. Destroy the Outlander! Rise, my child.
I am yours to command, Father.
Valen, you're free.
That felt lovely.
Enough! Vanquish the Outlander!
I have a better idea, Father. The Outlander's toy set me free.
Take the holocron, Arkan. The Outlander needs you.
Father is too strong.
You've proven yourself stronger. Show him the man you've become.
Arkan?
I won't let you face him alone.
Touchy. Valen, strike down the brother who betrayed you, and the Outlander who stole your life away.
Father makes a good point, for once.
She's your sister. Make her listen to reason.
Valen. Remember when we were children? Playing with Vexen. Sparring in the shadow of the Eternal Fleet. Running away and living in the swamps for a month. All that freedom stolen when Father locked you in anathema. He will cage you again unless you join us.
I won't be caged. Not again, not ever! I'm going to enjoy watching you squirm, Father.
You have won over my children. Now you will all be consumed by eternity! Enough! 100 more holocrons, an arsenal of superweapons. Nothing will stop me.
Hello again, curious friends. I see that you have invigorated yourself in the Force. Welcome back. I have been expecting you. The dark side energies are strong with us, acolytes. Today we are going to be exploring the full tale, biography, powers and abilities of the most notable and powerful Dark Lord to ever have existed. Tenebrae, Vitiate, Valkorion, whatever you wish to call him. He is undisputedly one of the most mysterious entities in the Old Republic era, and perhaps that we have ever seen. However, today we are going to be completely unraveling the mystery and deducing the entire life, reign, and death of Tenebrae, the immortal Emperor of Zakuul. Tenebrae, as known to the Old Sith Empire, Darth Vitiate, or the Sith Emperor, as known to the reconstituted Sith Empire, and Immortal Emperor of Zakuul, Valkorion, to the Eternal Empire, with an ancient dark side entity of gargantuan power who manipulated galactic affairs for nearly 1500 years, holding his position as the most powerful Force user in history until the era of Luke Skywalker and his new Jedi Academy. The Sith pureblood named Tenebrae story actually stretches back to 5113 BBY. Born on the Sith planet of Medras, a planet at the very edge of the Sith colony world, the illegitimate son of Medras's ruler, Lord Drama, and a poor farm woman in an affair, Tenebrae's eyes were said to have been as black as the void of space itself, and even as a mere infant, he showed no emotion, nor did he ever cry. Animals avoided the young boy, and his voice seemed to carry immense power and weight beyond his years, a sense of authority that would ring for the rest of his seemingly immortal life. Around the age of 6, Tenebrae began to manifest signs of immense strength in the Force and natural latent ability, akin to that of Anakin Skywalker, which raised the suspicions of his former stepfather, as neither he nor his wife was sensitive to the Force. Tenebrae's stepfather confronted his wife in front of a 6-year-old Tenebrae, and proceeded to attack her in anger after she admitted to having an affair with Lord Drama. However, Tenebrae gorged himself.
You are the Jedi's
anger,
finest.
and doing so,
It is not
stoking
enough
the
to
flames
save
of the
you.
darkness that were glistening within him, and he used his newfound powers to telekinetically snap
I'm not
the
trying to
farmer's
kill
neck
you.
in front of him,
Believe it or
killing
not,
his first victim.
I'm here to help.
Tenebrae then
You'd be
tortured his
surprised
own
what
mother
I
for months
believe.
with the Force.
Surrender, Sith.
Before
You
betraying
and your
her
master
family,
cannot
before
stand
killing
against
them,
all of us.
and began to subjugate the other members of his village with his power.
Force.
Over the course
He
of
told
the
me
next
you were all
4
dead.
years, Tenebrae's
Have faith,
influence
my
and
friend.
reputation
The Force is a
expanded as he
powerful
conquered
ally.
neighboring villages
The Emperor's
and raised
reign ends
legions of
today.
followers. Some
This
followed the child
directed
out of
passion.
immense fear of
Such
his
a
immense and
waste.
nigh unprecedented
My
power,
friends and I
while
wish
others
to
served
speak
him
with
out of
you.
fanatical loyalty
Please
and
accompany us to
fanaticism.
Typhon.
Tenebrae massacred
An
thousands of
infantile
those rise to
display
power
told
and tortured
Braga.
people for days in public
Reckless
executions,
pride,
gorging
limbed
himself
by
off their suffering and
self-righteousness.
becoming far more powerful.
You
Lord
are
Drama
master
heard rumors of
of
his son's
nothing.
killing, but because they occurred on the remote northern continent,
You can insult us all you want from
also due to the
yourself,
fact he
but
had
you are
long since
coming with
forgotten
us.
about the affair with Tenebrae's
Stand
mother,
there
and
because
was
I
fiercely
allow
angry.
it.
The Sith Lord believed that the
Because
events were of no
I
concern to
do
him.
not fear.
However, when Tenebrae was around the age of 10, Drama decided to investigate the rules of the void activity and determine whether he should be killed or become one of his servants. However, after insulting the young Tenebrae, the Sith Lord had underestimated his own abilities, and after revealing his true parentage, Tenebrae used an ancient Sith power to strip Dramoth of his power in the Force, and drove the man insane before finally killing him. Tenebrae then embarked on a campaign to conquer the
You are
rest of
mine.
Medria,
Servants,
while his elder
slaves,
half-brother, Dramoth
weapons,
II, led the
and
planet
you
to half of his
will
half-brother,
obey.
Vitiate. It took the title a total of 3 years to subjugate the world, and any of Lord Drama's subordinate Dark Lords of the Sith who attempted to seize the throne quickly fell before the young Tenebrae's immense power. After his conquest of Medras was complete in 5100 BBY, Tenebrae travelled to the Sith Empire's homeworld of Zyos, and came before the reigning Sith Lord and leader of the Dark Council, Lord Marka Ragnos, the Dark Lord of the Sith, and ruler of the Sith Council. Acknowledging and christening the 13-year-old's power, Ragnos granted Tenebrae to the right to rule Medrias as his own, and elevated him to the rank of Sith Lord, christening with the title of Lord Vitiate upon him. Returning to Medras, which he had renamed Nathema, Vitiate proceeded to construct and erect a palace upon the site of his childhood home, which would become a nexus of the dark side and rule the planet for 100 years, spending much of that time studying intensely the secrets of the dark side. Early in his reign, many young Sith flocked to Vitiate, and he taught his new followers to restrain their emotions and draw on their inner fury and anger in order to augment their power. Seeing the weaknesses of hoarding power, as the Sith ideology had attuned him to, and he would later attempt to initiate into his eternal empire centuries later. When Ragnos' departure from the physical plane in 5000 BBY prompted a struggle to determine who would succeed him between reigning Sith Lords Naga Sadow and Ludo Kresh, Vitiate wisely deduced not to involve himself or his world in the battle. Vitiate also refrained from participating in the crusade upon which the victorious Sadow embarked against the Galactic Republic. Instead, watching from Nathema as the Sith Empire crumbled nearly to ashes in their battle against the Republic and their Jedi protectors in the Great Hyperspace War. Vitiate had never participated in any battles hands-on or conquest, and had a reputation of being a reclusive scholar. However, when the Empire met its ultimate defeat in the battle above the Holy Tomb world of Korriban, well into his 2nd century, Vitiate put his machinations and plans to seize power into action. Broadcasting speeches across the crumbled and ruined Empire in 4999 BBY, describing how the Jedi Order would destroy the Empire and massacre its people once they discovered the rest of the Sith. Vitiate stoked the Empire's fears and carefully drove his people into a panic, a sensation that only augmented when the Republic invaded the Empire and destroyed a multitude of Sith sacred sites, completing the event known as the Sith Holocaust, the worst thing the Jedi have ever done to the Sith. Pillaging all artifacts and decimating all artifacts and relics they could find, on the orders of Supreme Chancellor Paul Timo. Assuming a leadership position, Vitiate called all remaining Sith Lords to Nathema in order to aid him in performing an ancient ritual, an incarnation of darkness itself, promising them that it would unleash the full strength of the dark side beyond anything that they could possibly imagine. At the similar time, Vitiate's historians and scientists searched for the location of Dromund Kaas, one of the Emperor's original colony worlds. Just before the other Sith Lords arrived to commence the ritual, the researchers finally succeeded in theorizing a plausible new hyperspace route that led back to Dromund Kaas, but also prevented the Jedi from following. 3 days after the lead researcher presented the team's findings, Vitiate announced the commencement of his ritual. But when the 8,000 Dark Lords who answered Vitiate's call arrived at his palace, he dominated their minds and bound their will to his, forcing the Sith to participate in a planet-wide ritual. The ritual itself took 10 days to perform, with the entire planet frozen in the grip of the dark side sorcery that Vitiate possessed. And upon its completion, all life on the surface of Nathema was annihilated, save for one individual, Lord Vitiate. The man absorbed the life force of the entire world, stripping the force from the very fabric of reality on Nathema, and gaining both unfathomable power and immortality as a result. At that moment, Vitiate became more than a Sith. He became more than an emperor. He became a god. From this day forward, Vitiate would be known in the eyes of many Sith as the most powerful being to have ever imposed his will on the galaxy. He shed his identity as Darth Vitiate, became simply the Emperor, a figure of immense power and wisdom in the eyes of his fellow Sith, an indomitable overlord that would crush the Jedi. When I was born, the Empire was everything. Everything existed to feed his whims. He was so far above us, no one, Sith or slave, would have dared even form an opinion about him. Blaming the destruction of Nathema on the Jedi, successfully using deception and manipulation to his advantage using his immensely intelligent tactical mind, the self-declared Emperor drove the people of the Empire further into turmoil and a panic, while simultaneously offering them hope. Venturing to Korriban, he promised to lead his people to salvation and safety from the Jedi, as he soon led a great exodus from the Sith worlds into the unknown regions of the galaxy to conceal his works from the Jedi Order for the next many centuries. Despite knowing the location of Dromund Kaas, the Emperor led his people in a series of blind hyperspace jumps, causing the exodus to last for 20 years, while the Sith people became more and more dependent on his guidance. Vitiate did this for multiple reasons, the primary one being to test his loyalty. He had the chance to weed out the weak. He needed to weed out those who were weak, those who were impatient, and if any attempted to hurry up and overthrow him, they would be crushed. Finally, in 4980 BBY, a scout vessel under orders of the Emperor located Dromund Kaas. When the vessel returned to the Sith fleet, the Emperor led his people to the long-lost world, and upon reaching the surface, he addressed the Sith. Amidst the wild jungle of Roman caste, he declared a new empire would rise from the ashes of the old, and offered both the Sith and their people, and their non-Sith servants, the chance to build an orderly and powerful society, an empire that would one day return and gain their revenge upon the Republic, and the dogmatic Jedi Order. Vitiate, in the eyes of his fellow Sith, could not be destroyed, and for across the next millennia, he would remain indomitable. The people who had come to see the Emperor as a kind of a god fervently agreed and set to work building their new empire. At first, the Emperor appeared in public often and dictated much of the Empire's policies and actions, but over the centuries he began to appear less and less. Not long arriving on Roman caste, he created the Dark Council, a group of the 12 most formidable Sith Lords besides himself, who served as the primary ruling body of the Empire. The Council soon began to take over much of the day-to-day running and operations of the Empire, while the Emperor himself retreated to the seclusion in the newly constructed Imperial Citadel, situated in the heart of Caste City, the capital of Roman caste, to delve into the further secrets of the dark side, learn even more incantations, to eventually grow up, to destroy the entire galaxy. One of his first actions was to select 12 Force-sensitive, pure-blooded Sith to become his hand, 12 servants who shared their master's longevity, in exchange for allowing him to draw on their strength in order to sustain his powers and thoughts. The hand's leader, Servant 1, was the first to be bound to the Emperor, while his constant companion, known as Servant 2, gained prophetic powers through a close connection to the Emperor's might at the expense of his own sanity. This shadowy organization was known to only a few masters of the Dark Council throughout the centuries, as they operated from obscurity to fulfill their master's desires. The Emperor spent that time studying even further into the mysteries of the Force, unlocking powerful secrets of the dark side, and taming the dark side further than arguably even Darth Sidious himself. In the early years after the arrival on Roman caste, the Emperor ordered the expansion of the edifice known as the Dark Temple on the outskirts of Caste City, an ancient structure that contained the tombs of the pre-hyperspace warlord Sith such as Aloysius Calig. The temple was originally intended as a burial place for the Emperor's enemies, but the Emperor preferred dark, powerful site rituals to steal the knowledge and life essence of his enemies in the structure's death and transform the area into a nexus of dark side force energy that would continue to remain for many thousands of years. Those rituals soon also affected Roman caste atmosphere, causing the skies to be engulfed with perpetual rain, storms, and lightning. They were extremely hazardous. One of the many Sith drawn, created during the rituals, escaped deep underground, becoming known as the Akur, the Ghost in Darkness. The Emperor also maintained chambers within the Sith Sanctum, the headquarters of the Sith Order in the Imperial Citadel, though only the Dark Council and the Emperor's personal guard were allowed to the lower levels of his sanctum, as it was off-limits for all other lesser beings. The Imperial Guard, as those elite warriors who served the Emperor, were non-force sensitives who served the Emperor with fanatical loyalty and unmatched combat prowess, trained in academics on dark side worlds. Each member of the Guard was brought before the Emperor himself and bound to his will, making their loyalty unwavering and absolute. Moreover, the Guard answered only to the Emperor. The Dark Council had no control over the sect's activities, despite the Guard's roles as protectors of the Sith Sanctum. Once the Emperor reclaimed the Sith Academy on Korriban over 1,000 years later, the Guard also took the role of guardians for the Academy. Sometime during his reign, the Emperor also ordered the construction of a personal space station in orbit of Roman caste, which he used as a temple fortress for his meditation and experimentation with the dark side, so that way none of his Sith servants would ever figure out what he was conducting. Around 4606 BBY, a Sith named Keleth began to preach Jedi sentiments of peace to serenity, while also utilizing the dark side. But the Emperor personally killed the heretic and sealed his spirit in the Dark Temple, a fate that befell many of the Emperor's enemies within the Sith Empire who attempted to rise up and defeat their immortal ruler. Another Sith Lord named Vodal Kresh, a descendant of Ludal Kresh, attempted to challenge the Emperor's rule less than 4 centuries after the Great Hyperspace War, breeding a race of slaves to serve as an army on the planet Athos. However, Kresh's plans never advanced to become ashes, as when the Mad Sith died, the Emperor declared Athos forbidden. Several centuries into the Emperor's reign, a Dark Councillor named Darth Locus summoned her fellow council members to a secret meeting in the midst of a violent storm. With an army of loyal Sith outside the meeting ready to kill any Dark Councillor who refused, Locus described a plot to overthrow the Emperor and lead the Empire into war against the Republic once more, a plot that all 11 councillors agreed to join in. However, the Emperor learned of the Council's conspiracy and schemes against him, and allowed their plans to unfold. When the 12 ascended the steps of the Citadel to confront him, the Emperor delivered his punishment. Locust's 11 co-conspirators died in a flash of light on the Citadel's steps, and Locust disappeared forever into the bowels of the structure as the Emperor tortured and then finally killed her. During the reign of Vitiate, 6 Sith Lords, each with their name Raptus, Bestia, Brontus, Calpheus, Striarch, and Tyrannus, meditated together and developed a powerful variation of battle meditation that was malformed with the dark side, allowing them to induce catastrophic fear in entire armies and change the course of battles. When Bestia approached the Emperor to share their insights, he conferred the title of Dreadmaster upon her and the others for their abilities and prowess in the field of this dark side, and they went on to serve the Emperor for centuries as prophets, advisors, and generals. Another one of the Emperor's experiments in the Dark Temple led to the formation and creation of the Ravager, a device that utterly consumed its victims' minds and forced them to reveal their greatest secrets as they died. Not even members of the Dark Council, such as Darth Maul and Darth Thanaton, could withstand the Ravager's overpressing influence, but the Emperor eventually concealed it away, locking it and entombing it within the temple. With other experiments, both failed and successful, fearing it as a challenge to his power. The Dark Temple itself was sealed after a few centuries, and remained so for the most of the Emperor's reign on Droman Kast. Yet, when Kast City's power grid expanded into the tunnels beneath the temple, devices such as the Ravager that was stored in the temple had the unintentional and inadvertently had the effect of driving thousands of slaves mad. They tricked me. We were never meant to win this war. They used me and my people to test the Republic's strength. Who used you? The Sith. Mandalore the Ultimate tells Revan of the Empire with his dying words. At the founding of his empire, the Emperor had promised to return and destroy the Republic, but over time that goal grew less and less important to the people of the Empire, who now focus on building a society and establishing the dominance of the dark side in the galaxy. However, the Emperor still manipulated and meticulously schemed to invade, but for reasons beyond revenge. In his studies, he had discovered a way through Sith sorcery to magnify the ritual he had performed on the Thamma to catastrophic amounts, that it would affect the entire galaxy in a cataclysmic wave of death energy, and he intended to use war with the Republic as a way to fuel that ritual. Around 4043 BBY, the Dark Council's Darth Queller and Darth Victon fought against a Kagath, a Sith ritual duel that saw apart the Imperial Citadel. When the dust settled, the two were standing, but the other 10 members of the Council combined their powers to utterly obliterate the two for their arrogance. The Emperor surprised the Dark Council by emerging from seclusion and contributed to the designs for the new Sith Citadel, charging the Sith Lord Darth Nostrum with completing the building exactly as the plan specified. After the completion of the Citadel years later, the Emperor locked Nostrum in the depths of the Citadel to test the structure's labyrinthine defences, very similar to the labyrinth from Greek mythology, and was gratified when the Sith Lord perished in agony, unable to find an exit as he intended. A few decades later, several members of the Dark Council, including Darth Nihilus and Darth Zedrus, discovered Nathema and learned what the Emperor was truly planning behind the scenes. Those Dark Councils, among them being Darth Nihilus and Darth Zedrus, and began a conspiracy to unseat the Emperor and save their empire and the galaxy from annihilation. The Sith were cruel, but Vitiate was no Sith. He was a dark side god. He did not care about being an emperor anymore. He wanted to be a literal god, and he didn't care how much he had to kill in order to get to that goal. Not long afterwards, around 3978 BBY, the Emperor sent a Sith pureblood emissary to the leader of the Mandalorian culture and faction at the time, Mandalore the Ultimate, one of the most powerful Mandalores to ever exist. The emissary explained to the Mandalore that his master had driven a Sith Lord named Drummoth II into exile, and convinced the warrior to help him search for Drummoth's tomb on the snowy world known as Rekiod, breaking into Drummoth's crypt and recovering the Sith Lord's remains for the Master. The Sith also told Mandalore of a vision the Empire had received, and one of the Mandalorians crushing the Republic in a glorious victory and triumph over the Jedi. However, the Emperor's emissary was also silently manipulating Mandalore with the power of the dark side, binding the warrior and convincing him to launch a war against the Republic in order to test its strength, while Vitiate continued to fuel his machinations and rituals behind the scenes. That conflict, which later became known as the Mandalorian Wars, began 2 years later, for a total of 16 catastrophic and deathly years. The Mandalorians initially had the upper hand, until another Jedi Knight, known as Revan, the Prodigal Knight, and Sith Emperor Vitiate's most bitter rival, took command of the Republic military with his friend and unofficial apprentice, Malik. In 3962 BBY, under Revan's leadership, the Republic gained more and more ground until they finally forced a confrontation at the Battle of Malachor V in 3960 BBY. Revan challenged Mandalore the Ultimate to single combat, using his force prowess and lightsaber proficiency in winning, striking down the warrior just as the Jedi's Lieutenant Mitra Surik activated a superweapon known as the Mass Shadow Generator. As Mandalore the Ultimate lay dying, the Emperor's spell was finally broken, and the cloud of disillusion that had been veiled upon him was finally lifted. And as the fallen warrior told his victorious opponent of how he had been manipulated, Revan had already encountered the Sith ruins on Korriban and Malachor V before the battle, and unknowingly drew the Emperor's attention in the process. The Emperor reached out to Revan and Malak, subtly manipulating them using the dark side. The Emperor watched as the pair retraced Mandalore's steps to Vitiate, and discovered the existence of his Sith Empire, playing right into Vitiate's hands. You see, the Mandalorian Wars had not entirely fueled his ritual. While he was nearly ready to consume all life in the galaxy, the magnitude of power required to endose this kind of ritual was immense, and Vitiate would need all the conflict to gorge himself on in order to become a literal god, and so he had to instigate a new war. Examining a datacron belonging to the Emperor's half-brother within Drummar's tomb, Mervin and Malik discovered the location of the Thema and travelled to the Barren World, where they learned the location of Droman Kaz itself and witnessed the Emperor's catastrophic nigh godlike powers. Leaving the Republic fleet that they had brought with them, the pair travelled to Droman Kaz alone, in secret, and spent months infiltrating the Imperial Citadel with aid from one of the Imperial Guard. What they did not respect, that was each member of the Guard was bound to the Emperor's will, with him being able to peer into their minds as well, and would never betray their master. Revan and Malik were arrogant, and when they finally infiltrated the Sith Emperor's throne room in an attempt to kill him, the Sith Lord effortlessly dominated their minds just as he did so many Sith Lords on the Thema so many years ago. Breaking their wills like a billboard, the Emperor forcibly converted the pair into the dark side and declared them Darth Revan and his new apprentice, Darth Malik. After prying information about the stasis of the Republic and the Jedi Order's militaristic skills from their minds, the Emperor sent his new disciples to recover the Starforge, a space station of unimaginable nigh omnipotent power, constructed by the ancient Ricardan Infinite Empire, to use in a new war against the Republic. Publicly, the Emperor informed his people that a pair of assassins had attempted to kill him, and that they had been executed as a result. However, the newly converted Sith Lords were stronger than he expected, and went out of his radius. They broke free of the Emperor's conditioning. Revan decided to declare his own Sith Empire, determined to conquer the Republic and unite against the Emperor, and proceeded to battle the Republic in what came to be known as the Jedi Civil War. The Emperor used me as his link to the light side of the Force, the Jedi Order. Through me he saw visions, but that same link also gave me influence. I convinced the Emperor peace was his best interest, tempered his hate. Revan explains how he manipulated the Sith Emperor. Revan was eventually betrayed by his apprentice during a Jedi attempt to capture him, and Malik seized control of their empire, becoming the reigning Dark Lord of the Sith. While Revan's mind was wiped clean by the Jedi Council using various devices and techniques, Revan went on to destroy the very empire he had created and defeated Malik, despite the latter's empowerment by the Starforge. But in the years after the war, he began to be plagued by memories of Droman Kaz. At the same time, the conspirators against the Emperor began to suspect they were on the verge of being discovered. Therefore, Darth Nihilus arranged for several assassination attempts against herself in 3954 BBY, as a way of framing the aged human Darth Zedrix. However, the Emperor interfered with her plans by suggesting that she bring in outside assistance in the form of the Sith Lord Scourge, one of the Emperor's most trusted confidants, who would become one of his most closest allies. Nihilus led Scourge through a series of elaborate tests and deceptions as part of his investigations, culminating with Scourge's merger of Zedrix. At that point, Nihilus revealed the conspiracy to Surge, and in order to convince him to join their cause, she took him to Nathema. However, at the same time, Eren had begun retracing the steps with the help of his ally Canderous Ordo on Kiyad. discovering the existence of the Empire and seeing the Sith Emperor still lived, and the location of the Thema, Revan ventured there with his own droid companion T3M4. Aboard their flagship, the famous vessel known as the Ebon Hawk. To make a long story short, both Jedi and Sith arrived simultaneously. Therefore, Darth Nihilus, one of the Dark Counselors, and Scourge, now entirely believing in the conspiracy's cause, shot down the Ebon Hawk and captured the Jedi Master, whom Nihilus identified as Revan. Revan was held in captivity by Nihilus for 4 years, tortured and tormented under the direction of Lord Scourge, until Revan's former lieutenant, the Jedi exile Mitra Surik, followed her friend's trail to the Sith homeworld of Dromund Kaas, and with T3M4 and 3,950 BBY, Scourge, who had come to trust Revan during their last 4 years, decided to join forces with him and Surik to destroy the Emperor, believing foolishly that their power combined would be enough to stop him. As part of their plan, Scourge approached the Emperor and exposed Nihilus' conspiracy, careful to exclude his role in the plot, so that the Emperor would take action against the Dark Counselor. However, the Emperor did not act as Scourge expected. Instead of simply eliminating the conspirators, the Emperor decided to purge the entire Dark Counselor, sending one clear message. He allows them to play politics and to play games as long as it doesn't interfere with his designs. But the moment it does, not only the conspirators suffer, but all do. The Emperor summoned 9 members of the Dark Counselor to his chambers, 7 of whom were loyal and the other 2 who were his conspirators and schemers, in the Citadel, and killed them with a blast of white light, turning them to vaporizing dust. Only hours later, he dispatched the Imperial Guard to destroy the estates of the 3 remaining councillors whom he had not expected to answer his summons on account of their treachery. With the full force of the Imperial military and the Sith Armada, the 3 members of the Dark Council were caught entirely by surprise, and the Guard decimated their entire power bases as well as the power bases of the other 2 conspirators. However, in this all chaos, Revan was ultimately freed from his imprisonment by Scourge and Surik during the chaos, and the trio prepared to end the threat that the Emperor posed and overheld over the galaxy, once and for all. Revan, Scourge, and Surik, as well as T3M4, infiltrated the Imperial Citadel and fought their way past the Imperial Guard, facing the Emperor himself in his throne room. Revan and his utility road charged their enemy after jamming the doors, causing the Emperor to blast the Jedi Master with the Force. Advancing on his opponent, the Sith attempted to dominate Revan's mind once again, but the Jedi opened himself to both the light and dark sides to unleash the Force in its purest form, an attack that sent the Emperor flying backwards, causing his calm demeanor to break for one moment as he let out a screeching hiss. When Revan attempted to charge the distracted Emperor, the Sith unleashed a blast of Force lightning that sent him screaming and charged to the floor, blasted T3M4 into shrapnel when the droid attacked him with a flamethrower with just a mere thought, using a Force barrier that was effortlessly strong enough to block off and reduce the flames. Picking up his fallen foe's lightsaber, the Emperor attempted to kill Revan with the weapon, but was stopped when Surik knocked it out of the Sith's hands with her own weapon. Faced by Surik, Revan, and Scourge, the Emperor expressed his disappointment with the latter, who was suddenly overcome with a myriad of visions of the future, realizing it was not their destiny to defeat the Emperor, and that he would always emerge once again, but it was in fact the fate of another, a fate that would come to be known and held by them being known as the hero of Tython. Scourge chose to portray his allies by stabbing Surik in the back when her back was turned, distracting Revan enough for the Emperor to blast the Jedi Master with more lightning, ultimately rendering him unconsciousness. Testing Scourge's loyalty, the Emperor ordered him to kill Revan, but stopped him just before the lightsaber reached its mark. The Emperor decided to imprison Revan, prolonging his life indefinitely through a combination of Sith alchemy as well as technology, placing him in a specially constructed prison in the heart of the impossible-to-escape Maelstrom Nebula. Scourge, who claimed to have deceived the 2 Jedi in order to bring them before the Emperor, was rewarded with the position of the Emperor's Wrath, the most highly acclaimed and sought-after position in the entire Sith Empire, and the most coveted position of every Dark Counselor. As his personal enforcer, the Emperor granted Scourge the same immortality that Revan received. Surik's spirit survived the death of her body, however, and remained faithfully at her friend's side, sustaining his mind throughout the history, while the Emperor fed off Revan's strength and knowledge. with the strength Surik lent him, Revan was able to fight the Emperor's control and even influence the Emperor in return, tempering the Sith leader's desire to restart war and postponing the renewal of conflict with the Republic for almost 300 years. The Emperor has manipulated events for centuries towards one goal, performing an even greater ritual that will destroy this galaxy. Despite Revan's influence, the Emperor's will could not be stopped, only slowed. Over the next 200 years, the Emperor advanced his plans for a new invasion on Republic space. However, Revan's plot and near-successful assassination attempt unsettled the Emperor immensely, causing him to delve even further into his studies of dark-side rituals, alchemy, in search of ways to further guard himself against danger and prolong his life. In his studies, the Emperor discovered the rare technique of essence transfer, which allowed him to prolong his life even further. Using this technique to transfer his life force in between host bodies, he created the position of the Emperor's voice, the host body of his consciousness, and the ultimate extension of his will. Throughout the next 3 centuries, the Emperor utilized many voices, as the ravaging effects of the dark side degradation took their toll upon the host bodies. Those hosts varied wildly, including the bodies of a young human female and an elderly Sith pure-blooded man, but they always possessed the same emotionless, cold male voice and malicious, furious black eyes. The Emperor's mental link with Revan also enabled the Emperor to torture the captured Force user, and both the Emperor and the Dreadmaster spent centuries attacking Revan's mind, trying to break his will and turn him to the dark side once more. Revan was able to resist, but the stress caused his mind to fracture, and he separated himself away from the pain, concentrating only on the Force. Around this time, the Emperor decided that he was tired of the galaxy as it existed, and the limits of that of the Sith teachings and its empire that it placed upon him, resolving to free himself from such restraints. Vitiate had heard whispers and rumours of an ancient and unstoppable fleet of technologically advanced warships operated by sentient droids that had nearly wiped out all of wild space. A powerful ship known as the Gravestone purportedly stopped this entire eternal fleet at a backwater planet called Zakul. And so Vitiate chose Zakul as the world upon which he would build a new empire, a truly eternal empire of his own design. Vitiate took on a human male body as a new voice that went by the aliases of Valkorion, the immortal emperor of Zakul, though he split his mind and energy between the Valkorion host and the numerous voices that oversaw the Sith Empire's march to war. Zakul's native humans were a superstitious and nihilistic people who worshipped a pantheon of ruthless old gods, and so Valkorion claimed to be the demon saviour of the Zakul prophecy, who would rise above the pantheon, and Isaac, the chief god of death, an immortal god of gods, who would topple Isaac, the ultimate devourer, as well as the rest of the old gods, and thus usher in a new age, taking advantage of their culture and ideology in order to ultimately prevail. Uniting the nomadic tribes of Zakul, Valkorion declared himself the immortal emperor of a new eternal empire that would span perpetuity, and established a city amid the swamps as he accelerated the Zakulians' technological advancement. However, the city was not grand enough for Valkorion, and his rapidly growing civilization became based in the Spire, a golden metropolis that sprawled outwards from atop the old world as the first city became known. He repurposed the 3 tribal leadership roles, matriarch, champion, and high shaman, into the Knights of Zakul, an order of Force users and cultists that were considered protectors of the people and were fanatical in their devotion to the immortal emperor. Making himself a Force battery, Valkorion tied their literal Force power to him. The closer they were to Valkorion, the stronger that they would be within the Force. A subgroup of these said knights, the Scions of Zakul, specialized in seeing the future and were obsessed with the idea of fate and destiny. Valkorion used this to his advantage, once again using his cunning manipulative abilities, using the Scion's Force visions to find the location of the dormant fleet. To control said fleet, he gathered Zakul's greatest minds and set them to work building the Eternal Throne, a throne in the skyscraper that topped the spire, whose technology gave the Immortal Emperor control over the Gemini units that operated the fleet and the sentient droids, making them use and adhere to any order without question, very similar to Order 66 with the clone troopers. The throne took generations of men to complete, finishing around 2 centuries after the Jedi Civil War started by Revan and Malak. But for some reason, Valkorion kept this eternal fleet within the unknown regions for the centuries that followed, cautiously biding his time until the time was right. Meanwhile, the Emperor's plans for war in the greater galaxy continued, as he sought to use such a conflict to fuel himself as he did on Nathema. The Force-sensitive Ovia family was installed in the Jedi Order at his request, giving him a family line of Sith spies within his ranks of his enemies. Around 3756 BBY, the Emperor became aware of the tomb of Naga Sadow on the moon of Yavin 4. Viewing Sadow's power as a potential threat to the planned invasion and his position as ruler of the Sith, the Emperor ordered his agent, Jedi Master Barrel Over, to eliminate any remnant of the Sith spirit. Over and his Padawan Erison Gint travelled to the moon on behalf of the Jedi Order, with the purpose of ridding it of its dark side energies, and preserving the light side energy that would dwell in it for millennia. But the pair were assaulted on their mission brutally by the descendants of Sadow's Masasai warriors. Over eventually returned to the Republic weeks later without his Padawan, but Sadow possessed Nint and resurfaced several years later in a failed attempt to kill the undercover Sith Lord. The Jedi's historians Ghost Dural deduced centuries later that Over had in fact been targeted by Sadow's spirit because he was a servant and voice of the Sith Emperor within the Jedi Order, and that the infiltrator used Gint to draw out and eliminate Sadow's spirit before the Empire invaded. With Naga Sadow's spirit vanquished, the Emperor took Yavin 4 for his own, and established the Imperial Guard Academy, there to guard the Temple of Sacrifice, an ancient Sith edifice that held a powerful Sith artifact. With the accompanying ritual, the artifact would allow the Emperor to absorb all life on the moon, and thus it was kept as a false-safe plan in case the voice was slain, a failsafe, a backup, in case Vitiate's ultimate scheme ended. One of the Imperial Guardsmen who underwent training at Yavin 4 was a hardened slave, Ivan, whose unchecked, murderous rage and ability allowed him to resist the Emperor's indoctrination process longer than any other Guardsman, but his resistance ultimately enabled his mind to snap. Now permanently in the Emperor's thrall, the insane Ivan became the most ruthless and devoted of the Emperor's guards, more devoted than even Lord Scourge. Around the turn of the 13th century of his rule, the Emperor became the Sith Master of Exile Kresh, a hybrid human Sith descendant of Ludo Kresh, who had fought against Naga Sadow and was predating the rise of Vitiate's own Sith Empire. He also began to experiment with learning and combining different Force techniques in an effort to extend his reach and sight beyond the capabilities of his own hand alone. During her apprenticeship, Kresh was sent to a monastery on Ambria, where the Emperor experimented on her with twisted powers and prepared to make her a vessel for his mind. He also spent countless decades installing infiltrators in positions of power throughout the galaxy. Throughout all of this, Vitiate secretly maintained two voices, the human body of Valkorion on Zakuul in the unknown regions, and the various bodies that served as the voice in the Sith Empire. Finally, in 3681 BBY, the Emperor himself announced the Sith Empire would return to the known galaxy and launch their assault on the Republic to destroy the Jedi Order. His meticulously calculated plans, in collaboration with the Imperial military, resulted in a series of victories against the Republic in Outer Rim territories, including the successful capture of the Aparo sector. Following his activation of his agents in the governments of Ruria, Sempidal, and Bekadan, as the Imperial Army and the Imperial Navy conquered planets such as Celias Van, Imperial troops massacred anyone who would not swear loyalty to their new Emperor, and troopers of the Republic military were simply murdered and massacred by the dozen on sight. By the third year of this great galactic war, as the conflict soon ensued, the Emperor was advancing his plans to spread his influence throughout the galaxy. Through centuries of experimentation, he was developing a combination of mental domination and the transference of his consciousness that would allow him to create his children, ultimate agents and extensions of his will, as the children would be extensions of his mind, who would not only be aware of their true allegiance, but him who he allowed to be. In the depths of the Sith Academy on the recently reclaimed Korriban by Malgus and Vindicant, the Emperor's servants were completing the machines and rituals necessary for the process, and his servants were scouring the galaxy for young initiates. To that end, he dispatched Kresh to the Ashworld of Lenico IV to learn from the Otorolan colonists. The colonists' legends spoke of shamans who dwelled through their descendants, something that was of great intrigue and interest to the Emperor's plans for his own children. After committing a series of absolutely horrendous atrocities, such as massacring the Ottolan colonists on her master's orders after her mission was complete, the Sith Emperor's apprentice, Kresh, returned to the Empire and was sent to the Cathol Rift. However, the Ottolan stories opened Kresh's eyes and she realized that the Emperor intended to hollow out her mind and possess her as the first one of his children, disciples of the Emperor who were unwavering in their loyalty, and whose mind was directly connected to the Emperor, whose body was definitely ingrained with a sense of dark side energy from their very conception. Fleeing her duties as the Emperor's apprentice and travelling to Republic space, she began to feed the Republic information and then locked herself in stasis chambers aboard the medical space station Colony Blue above Lanico, when the Emperor could only sense her dreams. Not long after her betrayal, the Emperor witnessed a vision of the Sith Lord Nankrang emerging victorious over the Jedi in the Mid-Rim, and he personally chose the banner that the Sith Lord's forces would carry into battle as a sign of ultimate triumph. Desiring to bring his wayward apprentice back under his control, the Emperor ordered the Dark Council, the primary ruling bodily system of the Sith Empire, to retrieve her, and the Council summoned the Sith apprentice Tenebrae to Drome at Cass. There, Kel was brought before the Emperor, whose current voice was a human male, and ordered to find Kresh in the Lanico system. The Sith assassin Kel chased Kresh across the galaxy, encountering her aboard Lanico Colony Blue, but failing to capture her until he finally succeeded in killing her in the depths of the Sith Academy on Korriban, where many other acolytes in their trials had fallen, where he stopped her from destroying the Emperor's ultimate schemes. After he learned why Kresh had fled the Emperor, Kel returned to the Dark Council and demanded to be elevated to the rank of Lordship in exchange for the information. The Council accepted and granted Kel the title of Darth Thanaton, who would become a prominent member of the Sith until the rise of Aloysius Kalig, also known as Darth Nox. In return, they learned of the existence of the children of the Emperor. In revenge for his apprentice's betrayal, the Emperor declared the very name Kresh an abomination to the Sith people and their ideology, and ordered all evidence of the family line across the Empire's history, including Sith Ludo Kresh, to be utterly destroyed. The Kresh family was completely obliterated from the entire history and fabric of the Empire, ensuring that the relatives of the Emperor's religious apprentice would never rise up against him again. By orders of the Emperor, Force-sensitive children of many species were taken from their families and entered into special groups in Sith academies. Those children came from many different places and backgrounds. Sawyer Bakan was a member of the noble house of Corellia, the same planet that would host Han Solo and birth one of the greatest heroes in galactic history. Organ Balacius was from the core world of Egrenom, and Kira Carson, a prominent Jedi Knight, was born on Drome and Cass itself, the core Sith capital world. At different points during their training, each of the children spent weeks undergoing various rituals and processes in the depths of the academies to augment their strength in the dark side, culminating in an audience with Emperor Vitiate himself, where they were infused with the Emperor's strength and bound to his mind and will. Bakan also became the Emperor's first son, shielding the other children from detection while also serving on the Jedi High Council as one of its most prominent initiates. And the children were sent out into the galaxy as the ultimate undercover agents that the Emperor could dominate and peer into their minds at will. Unless the Emperor willed it, his children knew nothing of their connection to the Sith or even their Force sensitivity, and they became high-ranked individuals with influence across the galaxy. Some were planetary representatives and senators, while others prominent commanders and admirals in the Republic military, and some even became acolytes of the Jedi Order. Kira Carson managed to escape Imperial space before the process could be completed, when a 10-year-old realized what the Emperor was doing to her, and his machinations behind the scenes. Though she would eventually draw the Emperor's attention during her time as a member of the Jedi Order, as a Padawan and comrade of the hero of Tython, the saying being that would be the greatest thorn in Vitiate's side of all of history. As the war progressed, the Empire scored victory after victory against an unprepared Republic, claiming worlds such as Utapau and Agamar in the second main offensive against the Jedi and the Republic forces. The Imperial capture of the Seswena sector in 3601 BBY was countered when the Republic won a resounding victory at the First Battle of Butharai, and the heroic last stand of Jedi Master Belth Aluis and his men at the second battle, inspired by the Republic to fight back against the seemingly unstoppable Imperial advances. Only a few years later, a Republic strike team led by Jedi Knight Jarek Kardane captured the Dreadmasters, depriving him of Advisor's most powerful fear-inducing battle meditation abilities, which were leading to a multitude of Sith victories from that point in time. A further blow to the Imperial war effort came when a much smaller task force of Republic soldiers defeated the Imperial invasion forces at the Battle of Alderaan, with the aid of Jedi Knight Satil Shan in 3667 BBY, but the Republic's resurgence was broken with a disastrous naval conflict known as the Battle of Hoth. The same battle that would resound across history and would later be replicated in The Empire Strikes Back in 3665 BBY. With the offensive going well once more, the Emperor became distracted by something else in the unknown regions. Around that time, a young knight named Senya Tirau joined Valkorion's elite guard on Zakuul, and the Immortal Emperor had begun to phase out humans from the Eternal Empire's military in favour of the technologically advanced droids such as the new Skytrooper battle droid, which made up a primary bulk of the Eternal Empire's military aside from the Knights of Zakuul. Senya Tirau spoke out against the change, catching Valkorion's attention, as no Knight of Zakuul had prepared to speak out of him beforehand. Her willingness to speak her mind earned her a permanent posting to Valkorion's elite Knights of Zakuul, who attended personally to Valkorion, and the two began a secret affair 2 years later. They were happy for a time, proving that in his Valkorion facade at least, Vitiate could feel at least some form of emotion. However, this came for a time and ended when Tirau bore twin sons, Arcan and Thexan, who had inherited their father's latent potential within the Force. As they grew older, the two boys adored their father and were indifferent to their mother's affections, but Valkorion himself grew increasingly distant from Senya and his children as the war against the Republic drew his attention more and more. The Valkorion body barely acknowledged the presence of his family for weeks at a time as he concentrated his power and focus elsewhere, and operated in another of one of his voices. By 30,660 BBY, the Emperor was growing restless, and the breaking of the Imperial-sponsored Mandalorian blockade of the Hydian Way did nothing to help the chances of ending the war. Not long after the blockade, a resilient Republic struck at Zyos itself, an ancient Sith homeworld, although the Empire eventually defeated and banished the attackers from the world. In a battle lasting much more than a month, the Republic was foiled again at the subsequent Battle of Ashas Ree, but the Republic's success at the earlier Battle of Ord Mantell and Ord Radama angered the Emperor enough to demand that the Empire retake the world for the Sith Empire. Spurred by their Lord's command and ultimate gods, prominent lords Darth Malgus and Darth Angral led Imperial forces to a costly victory in the reconquest of Ord Mantell and Radama. As the war neared its end of its third decade, Revan's influence on the Emperor, resulting in something that many Sith found surprising: plans for peace. Both the Emperor and the Dark Council were desperate for an end to the brutal war, which as it dragged on was forcing the Empire to strip entire worlds of their resources and peoples to fuel the Imperial war machine that they called their fleets. Around the same time, Tirau on Zakuul gave birth to a daughter she named Valen, but the child inherited her father's immense force power far more than the other two children in Arcan and Thexan. She made furniture move while she was just in the womb, tore apart droids as a toddler, and one time, a Knight of Zakuul dropped a ball that she had tossed. Valen crippled him. Tirau was horrified when her daughter crippled a guard during a training sequence, and went to Valkorion for help, as, according to her, she was the most powerful being in the galaxy. Though distracted, Valkorion had been paying some minimal attention to his children, and the similarities between himself as a child and his favourite child pleased and frightened the Sith entity. When Tirau came to him and begged to help their daughter, Valkorion's solution was to install various mental blocks that separated Valen from most of her latent force powers and potential, and suppressed her violent and sociopathic tendencies, but also damaged her personality, scarring it. She was no longer the little girl that Senya had once loved. She was cold, twisted, malicious. He continued to reign in torment. Tirau attempted to flee with her children, but they rejected her concerns and scorned her affections, and so a broken-hearted Tirau returned to service in the enforcement division of the Knights on the outer fringes of the Empire, never to speak with Valkorion again. In her absence, Valkorion remained emotionally distant from his children, cutting off all ties with them besides merely watching them, never being impressed by any of them. He never showed any emotion to any of his three offspring, despite him claiming that Valen was his favourite. He taught them the philosophy that one could achieve anything if they were willing to sacrifice. and changing their guards regularly to prevent them from becoming attached. Doing so reminded his children that while the knights as a call served his children, the knights considered the three of them to be merely extensions of Valkorion's will. However, he came to later regret his indifference towards Tira, considering his letting her leave to be an absolute mistake. While some of the 7 surviving Dark Councillors wanted to continue the war, the Emperor's plans were put in motion around 3654 BBY. After he gave them consolation, each of the 7 would receive their own star system from the Republic as part of the upcoming treaty. At the Emperor's request, Sith Lord Darth Barris, a prominent member of the Sith, led a delegation to approach the Republic with an offer of peace in 3653 BBY. Yet while the negotiations were underway on the planet Alderaan, a Sith armada under the lead of Darth Angral attacked the Republic capital of Coruscant and held it captive. Angral himself slew the Supreme Chancellor, while during the siege of the Jedi Temple in the taking of Coruscant, Darth Malgus led the charge, my favourite Sith Lord in all of history. Darth Malgus slew Jedi Master Venzala and established himself as one of the most brutal tormentors in all of history, plunging the galaxy single-handedly into an era of darkness that would not be seen until the reign of Darth Sidious. Utilizing Coruscant as a bargaining chip, the Empire forced the Republic to sign the Treaty of Coruscant and end the Great Galactic War definitively. The treaty forced the Republic to immediately withdraw all of its military units from battlefields across the galaxy and redrew the galactic boundaries, effectively granting the Empire control of those parts of the galaxy that lay to the west and north of the core, as well as north of the Corellian One. However, after the treaty's completion, the Emperor retreated back into seclusion and left the Empire under the control of the Dark Council, once again neglecting his Sith allies and returning to study the dark side excessively, becoming even more imaginably powerful than many Sith thought feasible. The signing of the Treaty of Coruscant brought an end to the greatest conflict the galaxy had ever seen, and the signing of the treaty ensued a period that soon became called the Cold War, where both the Empire and the Republic rebuilt their strength steadily, in secrecy, engaged in various minor proxy engagements to test their enemies' readiness against attacks. The Emperor retained an iron grip on the hearts and minds of his people, who viewed him fanatically and egotistically as a god of pure dark side energy. He had a seemingly apathetic role in governing them, despite mainly neglecting them, and the Dark Council continued their typical power plays and political idealing and maneuvering as they ran the Empire. Around 3655 BBY, a new world named Voss was discovered by the Empire, and reports delivered by Darth Barris on the Force-sensitive Voss species intrigued the Emperor himself. In this year, 3645 BBY, the species was ruled by a group of mystics whose prophecies were always accurate and would always relate to one's history and future, and the Emperor desired to have one of them as his voice. As a result, an Imperial force attacked the planet while the Emperor's hand kidnapped a mystic from the surface. The hand was successful in capturing the mystic, although the attacking force was absolutely wiped off the map by the machinations of the Star Cabal. The Emperor studied his captive's abilities throughout the Cold War, utilizing the Voss's prophetic powers to see visions of the future. A decade after the Treaty of Coruscant, the former apprentice of Jedi Master August Din drew the ire of Darth Angral when the Jedi Knight killed the Sith's son Tarnus on Coruscant. You may be recognizing this if you're a fan of Star Wars The Old Republic game adaptation. Driven mad with grief, Angral began to wage an absolute devastating war and series of conflicts against the Republic using stolen superweapons, which caused the Emperor to take an interest in the subject of Angral's wrath. When Angral encountered the Knight's apprentice, Kira Carson, on the planet Ord Mantell, the Sith Lord was surprised to learn that the Padawan was a former child, and he informed the Emperor almost immediately, desiring to control Carson once again and to use her as one of his voices within the very depths of the Jedi Temple. The Emperor sent her former fellow child Valis to retrieve her, and to finish the ritual that he had started decades ago. On the Emperor's order, Valis lured Carson and her master to an abandoned mining facility and battled the pair in an attempt to recapture Carson. When Carson and the Knight finally faced Angral aboard his flagship, the Oppressor, the Emperor chose that moment to take control of her, dominating and setting aside her will in favour of his own. On the Emperor's orders, Angral battled the Knight to the death, and the Emperor took full control of Carson when Angral fell to the Jedi's blade. However, with help from her master and the love that the two shared, Carson was able to summon a wall of light to permanently sever her connection to the Emperor. The loss of Carson angered and infuriated the Emperor, but he soon became suspicious of the knight, who would later be known as the hero of Tython after the battle with Angel, and grew weary of the Jedi's power over the next year and over the next coming years, as the hero of Tython remained a thorn in Vitiate's side that he seemed continuously unable to get rid of. In 3642 BBY, the tenuous peace brought by the Treaty of Coruscant began to collapse as a result of various proxy conflicts, Angrel's campaign among them. However, the Empire did not truly commit itself to a renewed war until the Emperor's hold on Revan was broken. The Force Ghost of Mitra Surik enlisted the aid of Jedi Master Oteg and the elite strike team composed of Republic soldiers and Jedi to free the imprisoned Jedi from the heart of the Maelstrom, and for the first time in centuries, the Emperor was freed from Revan's mental manipulations, no longer hindered by Revan's desire to protect the Republic and the Jedi. Without Revan's influence, the Emperor began to accelerate his plans for utter galactic annihilation, fueling and stoking the flames of war across the galaxy. When the Empire began to make war upon the Republican force, and when the Emperor learned that the former Dark Counselor Sajar, now the Padawan of Jedi Master Tol Bragar, was on the planet Quesh, the Emperor dispatched his wrath to capture Sajar, the most devoted of his disciples. Lord Scourge failed, however, when he encountered the hero of Tython and recognized the Jedi as the one he had seen in these visions 300 years ago, over the dead corpse of the Emperor. Knowing of the Emperor's interest in the hero, Scourge returned empty-handed to his master and delivered the news that the knight had joined the strike team and that Tol Bragar was assembling a strike team with the purpose of capturing and redeeming the Emperor. The Emperor set a detachment of Imperial Guard under the command of Guardsman Lucia to follow the Jedi to the planet Hoth, and Lucia soon reported that the strike team intended to infiltrate the Emperor's own personal space station. On Balmorra, the hero and the Jedi Master Warren Sadoru had already recovered the prototype of the cloaking device shielding the fortress, and Lucia's men failed in their attempts to capture the hero and prevent the acquisition of the fortress's somatics on Hoth, as well as the inner machinations and mechanics that it possessed. The Emperor also activated one of his children, Organ Blasius, in an attempt to kill the royal family of Sakai, an action that would have severely damaged the Republic's relationship with the Rift Alliance splinter government and harmed the Republic's war effort. However, Blason's meticulous schemes regarding the assassination of the noble family were foiled by the Jedi Master known as Barristan Thor, a prominent member of the Order. When the strike team landed aboard the Emperor's fortress, they were forced to fight through the Imperial Guard, as well as Siths more known as Harrowers, one of the few creatures the Jedi deemed too dangerous to be left alive, to reach the Emperor. And the first Jedi to enter the Emperor's throne room were the hero and Kira Carson. While the Emperor watched and gazed from his throne, Scourge battled a pair in a fierce duel, but the wrath was ultimately bested by the two Jedi. At that moment, Braga, Sadoru, and the Jedi Knight Lisa Narez arrived in the throne room. Now, it was time for the Emperor to display his true power. True to his word, the Emperor bound the Jedi to his will and turned them to the dark side. His servants spent several months retraining them as Sith, transforming the fallen Jedi into the Emperor's loyal agents, with the hero of Tython being placed under the tutelage of Overseer Chuck Scar, similar to Overseer Tremel from the Sith Acolyte version of Star Wars The Old Republic. However, the knight was finally liberated from the Emperor's control by the spirit of Augustin, his former master who had been slain earlier in the game, and the hero escaped back to Tython with the Lord Scourge, finally preparing to ensue the vision that he had seen 3 centuries prior, when he, Revan and Mitra, had attempted to assail the Emperor. The former Emperor's wrath revealed to the Jedi Council that the Emperor intended to complete the life-consuming ritual that he ensued on Nathema again, but on a galactic scale. But the ritual required a sacrifice of billions of simultaneous deaths to start it. To that end, the Emperor sent high-ranking executor Kranos and his death cult to the recently discovered Republic world of Belsavus, knowing that the fanatically loyal cult of Darkside followers would gladly sacrifice their lives for him. The Emperor orchestrated an Imperial attack to serve as a distraction, so that Kranos could detonate the planet's power core. The resulting explosion would ripple through the very fabric of space and time as well as hyperspace, consuming all life of the neighbouring systems in a fiery explosion of death. The Emperor also awoke Escalante, a child who was on Belsavis, in order to prevent the Bastion Thor from acquiring an army in the form of the ancient primordial Eshkar species. These petty conflicts mean nothing. The concerns of this galaxy are meaningless. Once I ascend, all will be tranquil in this galaxy. It is my promise to you. Now strike. The Emperor orders his wrath to kill the voice and free his essence. While the hero and Scourge rushed to Belsavis, the Emperor was baited into travelling to the planet Vos by Darth Barris, who was intent on seizing more and more power and influence in the Empire. Barris had alerted his leader to the presence of an ancient dark side entity known as Selmakor, an ancient being of pure malevolence who had been born 3 millennia prior, on the planet of Vos, and the Emperor travelled there to see if Selmakor's secrets could aid him in completing the ritual. However, Barris was manipulating the Emperor when the Vos body that the Emperor was occupying entered Selmakor's resting place in the ancient ruins that would come to be known to history as the Dark Heart, a pure nexus of the dark side. The Emperor discovered that he could not leave, and Selmakor began to fight the Emperor for control of his host's body, silencing the Emperor and cutting him off from the hand. The Emperor's last instruction was for the hand to recruit the apprentice of Darth Barris as his new Wrath. Barris's apprentice had been betrayed by the Sith Lord on the planet Quesh, and the hand sent the new Wrath to eliminate Barris's sister Darth Ekaj before she could escape her prison on Belsavis. In a resounding moment of strength, the Emperor was able to transmit a message to the hand that explained his predicament at the current moment. As a result, the Emperor's Wrath was able to locate him in the Dark Heart, and after driving Selmakor from the Emperor's host body, the Wrath fulfilled the Emperor's request, killing the voice definitively. That allowed the essence of the Emperor to return to his hand, who aided their master in inhabiting the body of a human male. Sometime after the Wrath's appointment, the Emperor had his servants construct droids known as the Optocrons, arcane fusions of ancient and modern technology that were hidden from sight, in order to be silent and to keep track of his Wrath's every move in order to prevent another betrayal like that of Lord Scourge, an incursion that the Emperor could not allow again. One of the Emperor's first actions, after being free, was to send the Sith Lord Fulmus, a renowned Sith sorcerer who excelled at max extinction through Sith magic, to Vos so that he could start the ritual, propagating it throughout the galaxy. On the Emperor's orders, the fallen Narez set a trap for the hero of Typhon, orchestrating in an attempt to assassinate him, using her lover, Jamar Chul, on the Korriban's Flame space station. But the hero was ultimately able to defeat the Nautolan Jedi and break the Emperor's control over her, through the eyes of another child he had established named Sophia Farasar. The Emperor learned that the Barrisan Thor was securing the age of the Vos species, but Farasar's attempts to kill the Jedi Master ended with the child's own death. The hero also succeeded in holding Fulminus's plans on Vos, preventing the Sith from utilizing Selmakor's dark side power to unleash a plague of madness across the planet that would ultimately prove sufficient extinction for the Emperor to fuel his galactic-wide ritual. Unconcerned with the recent losses, such as the defeat of Warren Sadoru after the fallen Jedi Master captured the Republic flagship Valiant, the Emperor dispatched Tol Braga to the embattled world of Corellia, when the Keldor Dark Jedi began to aid the Imperial military in the Battle of Corellia. However, Bagra's true assignment was to cause massive civilian casualties in order to progress the Emperor's ritual, and the Jedi Order soon marshalled up all available Jedi units and placed them under the hero's command on Corellia to combat Bagra's machinations. Upon learning from his first son that the Jedi had entrusted the Guardian holds several vital forces on Corellia to his unknowing children, the Emperor also activated those children in order to take control of the Hands and manage the Republic's war efforts on Corellia. After the hero's forces foiled Braga's attempts to massacre civilizations, the Emperor ordered the Keldor to detonate the Imperial battlecruiser Eclipse aboard the government district of Corellia's Coronet City. The corrupted Jedi Master, adhering to the dark side, who had long ago accepted his fate, and now served the Emperor willingly as his host, complied with his master's adherent instructions. But the hero of Typhon boarded the vessel and the cruiser, and managed to disable the ship's engines before detonation. In the process, the Knight also defeated Braga and managed to draw him back to the light side of the Force, after refusing to end the fallen Jedi Master's suffering, therefore eliminating one of the other of the Emperor's most valuable hosts and allies. The Emperor was further weakened by the loss of his first son, who was defeated by Barrisan Thor before Barrakan overwhelmed and imprisoned the first son within his own mind. with the first son's defeat. The shroud protecting the other children from detection was lifted, allowing the Jedi Order to effortlessly track down the Emperor's entire network of spies, therefore setting back his machinations for centuries. After learning of the Emperor's seemingly unknown and concealed location from Tol Braga on Droman Cast, the hero embarked on a mission to confront his Sith rival and end him once and for all in the Dark Temple, while an invasion force under the command of Grandmaster Satil Shan attacked the Imperial capital. Well aware of his enemy's presence and intentions, the Emperor waited in the depths of his Dark Temple as the hero and his astromech droid, T-301, fought their way through the Imperial military and the Temple's defences. As a droid, T-701 was the only one of the Jedi's companions who could safely confront the Emperor without supplementing to the Sith's control, conceding to his overwhelmingly powers of the dark side. But the hero and T-701 were forced to rescue one of the other members of the crew when the companion was pinned down by Imperial forces. When his enemies arrived in the Dark Temple's throne room, the Emperor arose from his throne and unleashed a bolt of violet lightning after mocking the Jedi for sacrificing his strength of power to rescue an ally. The hero intercepted the attack with a lightsaber, and the Emperor summoned 3 mid-form duplicates of himself using a combination of rituals and Sith alchemy to attack the knight as he slowly descended the steps, unworried from his throne. The Jedi and T-701 made quick work of the Phantoms by the time he reached the bottom, and the Emperor remained unfazed when his opponent's weapon was raised in the guard stance. The hero questioned the Sith's desire to consume the galaxy, but the Emperor warned the knight that his mind and abilities were beyond the Jedi's comprehension, and his goals were his and his alone to decide. Claiming that he would outlast everything, and that his will could not be supplemented nor halted, the Emperor summoned more duplicates of himself and drew his own lightsaber. Both the Emperor and his Phantoms utilized Sith magic and lightning as they battled the hero of Tython and T-701, vanishing and reappearing on command using teleportation within the dimly lit chamber to toy with his opponent's senses. But to the Emperor's utter shock, the Jedi slowly but surely gained the upper hand in their altercation, cutting down the duplicates one by one every time the Emperor summoned them, and battering away at the true Emperor's defences. Finally, the Phantom Emperors dissolved into swirls of dark energy, and the hero's true opponent fell to his knees before the steps. However, when the knight approached the seemingly injured Emperor, the Sith unleashed an explosive blast of force lightning that sent his opponent sliding across the back floor. The Emperor acknowledged his enemy's immense power, but mocked the Jedi's limiting adherence to the light side of the Force before unleashing a second, more powerful blast of lightning. The hero managed to constrain and catch this attack on the blade of his lightsaber, and the two opponents advanced across the room towards one another as the Emperor continued to blast the Jedi with lightning. As they reached each other, the knight spun to the side and delivered a devastating strike to the Emperor's waist. The Sith fell to the floor, but lightning continued to crackle around him as he tried and failed to rise, and indefinitely declared that he would never be redeemed or contained. Brushing off the hero's claims that he would face justice, the Emperor again attempted to fail to his feet, under the belief that the Emperor was dead. The Jedi contacted Lord Scourge to report success, and the former Emperor's wrath informed his ally that the Emperor was not yet defeated, having lived within him for the past 3 centuries. The Emperor's essence left his fallen voice and warned the hero that he would take the Jedi with him if he had to die, releasing an enormous nexus of dark side energy from his body of the voice as a final defiant act. The energy rippled through the Dark Temple and began to collapse the structure, so the Jedi and T-701 fled the structure and returned to their ship. Now, the Emperor, a mere facade of the being he once was, returned to the care of the hand he had prepared and entered a deep slumber on Yavin 4, in order to recuperate and revitalize himself from the deaths that would evolve around the galaxy, as the battle with the hero had grievously wounded his spirit as well as his physical form. Yet the rest of the Empire believed that their leader had fallen. Darth Malgus, a prominent Sith warrior, took advantage of the absence in the power vacuum to steal the Emperor's space station and declare his own new Sith Empire. Through the false Emperor would be defeated in the battle with both Republic and Imperial forces on Ilum, Malgus ensued a new generation of Sith, something he would continue even into his elderly years. Hidden among the dark side energy swirling invisibly on Yavin 4, the Emperor slowly recovered from the devastating injuries that the hero had dealt with him by killing the voice. Vitiate slowly recovered from the injuries and wounds he had been dealt with, as his essence had sustained during the battle with the hero. The Imperial Guardsmen on the moon were tasked with preparing the device in the Temple of Sacrifice for use in restoring the Emperor, and the Emperor's spirit rested in a nearby temple, In his slumber, the Emperor's injured mind reached out to his children and began to whisper faint whispers to them, raging at the night and issuing contradictory orders as his consciousness moved quickly from thought to thought. Some children, such as Tanak, were able to block out the inherent commands of their weakened master, but others, like Suri, were almost driven mad by his rage and constantly shifting thoughts. The Emperor's slumber had also had the unintended consequences on Valen. With the bulk of the Sith entity's power consumed away on Yavin 4, Valkorion's mental blocks and psychological influence within Valen's mind broke down. With her powers re-emerging, Valen did not strike back against her father, however, instead choosing to bide her time. When the Emperor's commands directing their actions, the Dreadmasters, who had recently been freed from their prison on Belzevus after 27 years of confinement and entombment, decided to become an independent society of dark-side cultists as they considered the Emperor as the only one worthy of their loyalty, manipulating the Trandoshan warlord Capes on Denova, as well as other events across the galaxy. The Six turned against both the Empire and the Republic to become a third power in the new war. During that time, the new Emperor's hand was instructed to appoint Darth Akina as the successor to Darth Karen, the head of the Sphere of Technology, as Akina was ordered by the hand to oversee the Acheronum, the Empire's storehouse of powerful Sith artifacts and treasures. Not long after the Dreadmasters defeated at the hands of the Empire and the Republic, a new power arose in the ongoing war. The Order of Revan, a fanatical cult dedicated to the returned Force user Revan, who had returned from the brink of death, bringing himself back from the netherworld of the Force. After being defeated by the Empire in an earlier battle, Revan's dark side half reanimated his corpse, while his light side half attempted to become one with the Force. Driven mad with hatred, Revan became determined to rid the galaxy of the Emperor, and learned of both the Emperor's presence on Yavin 4 in his spiritual plane, and the ritual that could restore him to a physical form by draining the entire life of a planet, like he had done on Thema millennia prior, or even the galaxy. After his attempts to remove the Republic and the Empire from the battlefield failed, Revan decided to proceed with his plans regardless, and his Revanite forces, the fanatical cult that he had once detested and slaughtered, quickly took control of Yavin 4, now his most powerful puppets. Revan prepared to restore the Emperor and then kill him, but before he could begin the ritual, a coalition of Imperial and Republic forces confronted the Revanites and waged war against the cultists on the moon. The machinery in the Templar's sacrifice was destroyed before the ritual could be completed. But Revan, still determined to destroy the Emperor at all costs, retreated to the Emperor's sanctuary, hoping to confront the Emperor's spirit. He was pursued and ultimately defeated in battle by the Imperial and Republic forces, who had become temporary allies in the face of the threat that a returned Emperor posed, more powerful than his puppet, the Voice, had ever been. But it was too late. Unbeknownst to all but a few, the Emperor had been feeding off the death and chaos generated by the Battle of Yavin 4, and now had the capacity to flee the moon. Declaring his intention to retake the galaxy, the Emperor's essence vanished from Yavin 4 without taking a physical form or possessing the host, deeming death as no longer a problem. Vitiate, the former Emperor of the Sith, was known to the Empire that rejected him. Soon resurfaced on the planet Zyas, an ancestral world of the Sith Empire and the Sith Purebloods, believed to be one of only two planets, the other being Korriban, that exclusively housed the native Sith Purebloods. Extending his influence across the globe, he began to possess the planet's population effortlessly, feeding off the chaos and death that his puppets caused, thus revitalizing him, allowing him to become stronger and stronger by the second and possess more of Zyas's population. When the Sixth Line, a covert team of Jedi recruited by Agent Theron Shan and the Republic's Strategic Information Service, arrived to investigate the activity on Zyas, Vitiate took them as his pawns and made their leader, Master Suro, his favoured puppet. Agent Shan and Sith Intelligence Minister Lana Beniko joined forces with their combat alliances on Zyas to combat Vitiate's schemes, but they are unable to prevent the Supreme Chancellor Leontine Saresh from launching an invasion on Zyas. This therefore allowed Vitiate to gain hundreds of more puppets, and making his influence over the world absolute. Using electrostatic gun technology, Vitiate's enemies managed to disrupt the Sith entity's control over his puppets, and Vitiate's forces swarmed the People's Tower in the city of New Adasta in order to prevent them from generating a massive electrostatic blast using that tower. The Allied Republic and Imperial forces succeeded in activating the electrostatic field, and briefly broke Vitiate's control on most of the city. but his control over Ciro was so strong that he immediately reasserted control and dominance over the Zayastans. His possession of her was only broken after a fierce battle, but it was not long afterwards that the efforts of the electrostatic field faded to the point where Vitiate was able to effortlessly possess the population again. Cyrus's population was evacuated as quickly as the Emperor and Republic could manage, but only a fraction of the population were off-world by the time Vitiate made his final call. Manifesting a wave of dark side energy, it rolled around the globe, turning all living things to ash and leeching the force from the world, siphonizing all force energy from living beings and living creatures to revitalize him. The only things that survived Vitiate's hunger were the monoliths, a new breed of Sithborn that Vitiate had manifested using dark side tendencies and power, rather than by manipulating existing creatures. Believing himself to have finally passed beyond death's reach, deeming it as no longer his concern, Vitiate decided that he had transcended the link between flesh and identity, and thus no longer required such vessels such as his voices and children. His hunger satiated, the Force entity departed the now barren world of Zyos, and vanished into the unknown regions, where he consolidated his entire essence into the Valkorion corpse, abandoning the name Vitiate, severing his ties to the Sith, deeming them as a failed experiment. Now he was the Eternal Empire, Valkorion, Immortal Emperor of Zakul. Not long after Zyos, Valkorion was approached by his twin sons, who together proposed a plan to test the strength of the border worlds between the Eternal Empire, which Valkorion governed, and the Eastern Galaxy. Now fully devoted to ruling the Eternal Empire of his own design, Valkorion sanctioned the attack, but only permitted the twin in black Thexan to lead the Eternal Fleet. Arcan disobeyed the command of his father, and accompanied his brother on several sieges anyway, striking at core worlds such as Tython and Korriban, the very homeworlds of the most devoted and powerful Force sects in the galaxy, or should I say, what once were the most powerful. During the attack on Korriban, Arcan was seriously injured in battle, losing an arm and suffering severe wounds and burns to his face. When Thexan reported on the battle to his father, Valkorion was uninterested in his son's grievous injuries, believing it to be a fair price for his defiance against the Immortal Emperor. When the two returned from the raids, they presented the trophies of lightsabers and banners to their father at the foot of the Eternal Throne. Valkorion responded with absolute silence and turned away, unimpressed. Infuriating and already resentful Arcan, Valkorion's son was overcome with anger, staring down at his arm as it began to shake, his cybernetic and prosthetic that he had sacrificed for the approval of his father. Overcome with a rage he'd never felt before, he leapt from his perch and leapt at his father, intending to kill him with his lightsaber, while Valkorion remained uninterested in the events occurring behind him, having foreseen the future, knowing exactly what was about to play out. Thexan reached out with the Force and pulled his brother back in mid-leap, and Arcan's rage had to be satiated somehow. Engaging in a furious but brief lightsaber duel with Thexan, it ended up with Arcan slaying his own twin in his fury. As the horrified brother came to his senses, a seemingly unmoved Valkorion approached him, and commanded Arcan to come with him, extending his hand in approval. In the aftermath of the Eternal Empire's attacks, Darth Maul led a joint Republic Imperial expedition into the unknown regions in pursuit of both the Sith Emperor, as well as the mysterious attackers. As they approached Zakul in space, Arcan recorded their approach to his father atop the spire, and Valkorion, who was already using the dark side and well aware of the visitors' incursion, deployed the Eternal Fleet. Mars' expedition was absolutely wiped off the galaxy, but Arcan's forces captured Mar and a second figure who had been involved in the war and hunt for the Emperor, who would later be known as the Outlander. At his father's command, Arcan brought the two to Zakul and the Eternal Throne, and before the Eternal Fleet, where the foreigners recognized Valkorion almost instantaneously as the former Sith Emperor. Amused by Mar's anger, Valkorion offered to share his power and influence with his prisoners. After Mar defied him, he killed Mar with an enormous blast of Force lightning when the Sith Lord stole a Zakul Knight's lightsaber pact and attempted to attack him. Valen, his only daughter, ordered everyone out of the throne room, leaving only Arcan, Valkorion, and the remaining prisoner, to whom Valkorion repeated his offer. However, Arcan betrayed his father at that moment, and Valkorion was struck down, but the Force entity simply shifted his essence into the prisoner's mind. Sensing his father's survival, Arcan quickly had his father's newest host body frozen in carbonite to contain him, and publicly blamed the Outlander for Valkorion's death. Claiming the throne of the Eternal Empire, Arcan took control of the Eternal Fleet as Eternal Emperor and launched a campaign that overran both the Republic and the Sith Empire, though he was locked within the Outlander's mind. Valkorion did not possess his host's body. He instead manipulated the Outlander's dreams within their shared carbonated prison, attempting to convince the Outlander that he sought only to aid his host in taking the galaxy for their own and continuing to offer to share his power, revitalizing the galaxy out of the brutal control of Arcan and Valen. The Outlander was imprisoned for 5 years until Lana Beniko and their allies launched a rescue mission, and Valkorion watched as the Outlander and Beniko's group escaped the Spire and discovered the Gravestone, the ship that could battle the Eternal Fleet in the Endless Swamp, and a ship that had isolated the builders of Ikoax many millennia prior to Vitiate's arrival. Valkorion was intrigued when Senya Tyrell joined the Outlander and Beniko's group, helping to raise the Gravestone so that the group could escape Zakul and perhaps combat the Eternal Fleet's overwhelming numbers. And his presence within the Outlander was revealed to the Outlander's companions when the remaining Scions of Zakul put the Outlander through a series of trials on the Shadowport Asylum. As the Outlander gathered allies to fight against the Zakul loyalists, Valkorion continued to offer his power and aid to his host, seemingly sincere in his claims that he wanted only to aid the Outlander in his crusade. The false entity sought to stop Arcan from destroying all that he had constructed over his millennia. After a confrontation with Arcan at the Battle of Asylum, the Outlander's team escaped the ravaging effects of the Eternal Fleet and journeyed to the remote planet of Odessin, where the Outlander established an alliance against Arcan's Eternal Empire, with support from elements in the Republic and the Sith Empire. Later, on the advice of Lana Beniko, the Outlander wandered into the jungles of Odessa to converse with the spirit of Valkorion. On any strategy the latter might possess, Valkorion mocked his host, claiming that they were weak and that his children possessed powers that surpassed those of both the Jedi and the Sith. Valkorion told the Outlander that their knowledge within their aspect of the Force was masterful, but they needed to extend their boundaries to transcend a new level of power. They began a brief skirmish with the Outlander. When the skirmish ended, Valkorion showed disappointment on the Outlander's performance outright and felt a disturbance in the Force, and he then seemingly left his host. During the Battle of Odessin, Arcan attempted to speak to Valkorion's dissipated spirit through the Outlander, but was met with absolute silence. Nonetheless, his subsequent assaults proved Valkorion had left at least some of his power within the Outlander, who drew on it cautiously to defeat the Arcan at last. Valkorion's spirit continued to goad the Outlander down the path of darkness and destruction by urging him to bring down Empress Valen, who had taken the mantle after she assumed Arcan had been a traitor, after she had pushed him away after being rescued by their mother Insenia. During Valen's takeover of the Gravestone, he awakened Valen's mental conditioning by speaking the trigger words, "Kneel before the dragon of Zakul," and leaving the Outlander another weapon to utilize against her immense force potential. The trail led there to Ikoath, where Valen regained control of the Eternal Fleet from Scorpio's free will, then back to Zakul, where the Outlander and Theron Shan crashed Valen's grand festival, and then finally to Nethema, the ancient void that Valkorion had ripped all his life from millennia prior, where Valkorion had sent Valen to be properly conditioned due to the Force and the void that was presented on Nethema, and the unleashing of power as Valen broke through the mental cage Valkorion had put it into. His presence in the Outlander's mind appeared to be fading in and out at regular intervals, due to a great portion of his reservoir, as well as his imprint being erased from the galaxy, or at least partially hindered. Despite this, he maintained enough of a grasp to attempt to warn against intrusion into the vaults beneath the sanitarium. The reason became clear to the Outlander soon enough. It contained a hologram that held the Force essence of Valkorion's father, Lord Dramath, who had been imprisoned since his illegitimate son, then known as the Sith pure-blooded child Tenebrae, had usurped him more than a millennium before. Dramath's spirit offered the holocron as a means of defeating Valkorion, usurping his spirit and dominance once and for all. After Valen unleashed a full-scale assault on Odessin, she confronted the Outlander with her full powers, cracking the walls of the Alliance base. Despite this, the Outlander succeeded in vanquishing Valen, but, as Valkorion soon revealed, her death left the Eternal Throne without a master, causing the Eternal Fleet to revert to its original purpose of absolute galactic-wide extermination. To stop the absolute rampage that would be wrought across the galaxy, the Outlander had to seize the Eternal Throne for himself. Accompanied by 2 others, the Outlander fought through the lines of Knights of Zakul, Sky Troopers, and the others barring the way up into the spire before entering the throne chamber itself, the same chamber that he had been through months prior, and having an audience with Valkorion himself, where he had been assassinated. And the Outlander sat upon the throne, becoming immobilized in agony as the power of the throne pulsated through his body. When it was done, the fleet had stopped firing at long last. Valkorion appeared as an apparition before the Outlander, congratulating them for finally becoming ruler of Zakul and master of the Eternal Throne, before absolutely lashing out with his pure dark side malevolence, trying to force the Outlander to submit to his will. Valkorion remained the pure adherent of the dark side. Valkorion would be the eternal emperor. No, not eternal, immortal. He did not care for being a Sith emperor. He did not care for being an eternal emperor, not even an immortal emperor. Valkorion, Vitiate, Tenebrae all wanted to be a god. In the aftermath of the battle, Valkorion returned once again, claiming the Outlander was now ready, and showing something that he had only shown once to Arkan, showing it once again to the Outlander, a sign of approval. The power that no Sith or Jedi could buy, especially from an entity as powerful as Valkorion. Valkorion, however, still bound to the Outlander's mind, continued and relentlessly urged the Outlander to launch an offensive against Empress Valen, his own daughter, who would etch chaos and destruction throughout the galaxy. In a cunning move, he triggered Valen's dormant mental conditioning while she was taking over the gravestone, providing the Outlander with yet another lethal weapon to use against her, which could sap her of her energy and leave her exceptionally weak. The trail of destruction left by Valen ultimately led the Outlander to the ancient world of Ikoath, where she regained control of the Eternal Fleet, an enormous armada of technically advanced ships from the artificial intelligence known as Scorpio. The journey then led them back to Zakul, where the Outlander and Theron Shan successfully crashed Valen's grand festival, dealing an absolutely detrimental blow to the Empress. The final showdown between the Outlander and Valen occurred on the barren and lifeless husk of Nathema, the same place that she had had her conditioning, a desolate planet with a void in the Force. Here, Valkorion's hold over the Outlander's mind seemed to wane as Valen broke free from the mental cage he had imposed on her. Despite this, Valkorion managed to warn the Outlander against intruding into the vaults beneath the sanitarium. As it turned out, the vault contained an ancient Sith artifact that held the Force essence of Valkorion's long-dead father, Lord Dramath, who had been imprisoned there for over a millennium since Valkorion, then known as Tenebrae, had usurped him. Dramath offered the holocron to the Outlander as a means of finally defeating Valkorion once and for all. With this powerful weapon in their possession, the Outlander was poised to take on Valkorion and end his reign of tyranny once and for all. After Valen unleashed a full-sized defensive assault on Odessin and confronted the Outlander with the full extent of her powers unleashed, cracking the walls of the Alliance base. Despite this, the Outlander ended up vanquishing Valen, but, as Valkorion soon revealed, not only did he consume her spirit, but her death left the Eternal Throne without a proper master, calling the fleet to revert to its original purpose of absolute galactic-wide extermination. To halt the rampage, the Outlander had to seize the Eternal Throne, with Valkorion secretly goading him into this course of action in order to take over his spirit and become an absolute dictator. Accompanied by 2 others, which depending on the game could either be 2 Sith or Senya and Arkan. The Outlander fought through the lines of the Knights, Sky Troopers, and others bearing the way up to the spire. Before entering the throne chamber, the Outlander sat upon the throne, becoming immobilized in perpetual agony as the power of the throne pulsed through their body. When it was done, the fleet had stopped firing at last. Valkorion appeared before the Outlander, congratulating them after years of strife, finally becoming the indeterminate ruler of Zakul and master of the Eternal Throne. However, the Immortal Emperor would not be stopped. He then lashed out with his power, forcing the Outlander to submit to his will. He revealed that he intended to hollow out the Outlander as a new vessel for his immortal spirit, just as he had done to the original Zakulian warrior Valkorion centuries prior, and take back the throne for himself. Though the Outlander tried to resist, Valkorion shattered his opponent's mind. forcing their being back into the depths of their own psyche. The Outlander, however, resurfaced in the void of their own mind, wearing the form of Valkorion. Guided by their voice to find Dramoth's holocron, the Outlander as Valkorion relived the vivid memories they had shared, including the altercations with Arcane and Valen on Odessen, as well as the apparent abandonment of the Outlander in the wilds of Odessen, which in all actuality had been in fact a ruse to see how the Outlander would function without his counsel, and to see his power when Valkorion was not inhabiting him. The Outlander soon regained control, facing off against Valkorion, who admitted to being impressed with his foe's persistence in the face of an unwinnable entity. Holding the Emperor at bay, the Outlander used Drummer's holocron to break whatever psychological hold he held over his children. He then allied with their one-time foe to destroy Valkorion. When the Outlander appeared to gain the upper hand, Valkorion pulled the holocron from the Outlander's grip and destroyed it in a blast of 4 energy, boasting that even if they conjured 100 more holocrons in an arsenal of superweapons, it would not be enough to stop him. But the Outlander, now in full control of their own mind again, spoke the words, "Kneel before the dragon of Zakul," the trigger words for Valen's conditioning. To Valkorion's utter shock, thinking that only Valen was vulnerable, he became powerless before his enemy. Twisting the dagger further, the spirit of Valen spoke the same words with a gleeful vengeance. Reeling in pain, Valkorion turns towards the throne only to be confronted by his wife Senya, who declared that Valkorion had turned his back on his family for the last time and struck him with her lightsaber. However, Valkorion countered, stating that a god has no family, and without him, they were nothing. Valkorion rose to strike the Outlander, only to be immobilized by Senya and their children. He tried to lash out one last time, and was struck down the spot by the Outlander. With a great burst of dark side energy, the Immortal Emperor was gone, seemingly never to return. However, this was not truly the end of the Emperor. Due to his obsession with immortality and subsequent usage of the Emperor's voice, Vitiate kept his original body of Tenebrae locked in stasis, where it could be harmed by natural forces nor outside interference, and kept its location secret among his most trusted servants. One of these servants, however, would be the traitorous and treacherous former Emperor's Wrathward Scourge. Vitiate, at an unknown point, carved an ancient Sith ritual into his original body to act as a last resort in the event his body was harmed, which would immobilize the attackers by placing them into a coma. And the plague would spawn an entity that would feed on the victims by connecting their minds, emerging into an even stronger entity. However, despite the effectiveness of the plague, anybody who was previously granted a portion of Vitiate's power was rendered immune to the plague's effects, due to the past power acting as a vaccine. Lord Scourge and Kira Carson, however, discovered the location of Vitiate's original body, and destroyed it prematurely at practically the same time the commander destroyed Valkorion's spirit in his own mind during the Battle for Zakul. This event led to the plague being released and rendering Scourge and Kira comatose and incorporeal for more than a year. Satil Shan and her followers learned of this and rescued the duo. However, they unknowingly doomed themselves in the process, without having any sort of vaccine similar to what Scourge and Kira possessed. The duo now trapped plagued Satil Shan and her followers in a transport programmed to travel random courses through the unsettled sectors of the Outer Rim. With a few Medroids to tend to them, Scourge and Kira later learned that the plague unleashed an entity that was connecting the minds of Satil and her followers, emerging into an even stronger, united hive mind. They then sought the aid of the Outlander, first by testing them on Mek-Shar to ensure Valkorion was truly dead, and no trace or remnant of his power remained in their mind, mainly due to the Emperor being an absolute master of deceit. Upon the commander passing the test, Scourge and Kira revealed their plan to the commander. They would send a signal to the transport in order to bring it into an empty sector closer to Odessen. Upon its arrival, they would board the ship, connect their minds through the Force, and attempt to destroy the entity. If this did not work, their last resort would be destroying the transport entirely, killing Satil, her students, and perhaps even the 3 on there. The commander agreed to this proposal, and Kira stated it would be a while before the transport came into range. Until then, Scourge and Kira offered their aid in any mission the commander requested, much to Scourge's increasing frustration. However, the ship disappeared, not appearing at its next expected and anticipated rendezvous point. to hunt it down. They suggested the commander sent droids, as they would not become corrupted by Vitiate's dark power. The droid T-701, piloting a starfighter, located the ship and transmitted direct coordinates to Odessa. This also uncovered the continued existence of the Emperor's Hand, Vitiate's innermost circle of dark-side fanatics and cultists. They had been vessels of the Emperor's power, and thus could resist his corruption. The commander, Scourge and Kira, intended to travel alone to the ship, but were joined by others from Odessa, who provided lethal fire support. When the Emperor's Hand attacked them in the shuttle, Tessivant had gotten aboard the ship and sabotaged its systems, enough for the commander and their allies to board. Kira shut down the ship's engines and defences, while Scourge joined the commander to launch the escape pods and jettison the servants' shuttles, in order to prevent the curse from getting off the ship, as if it did, Tenebrae would become virtually unstoppable. As they explored the ship, however, the commander and Scourge discovered that the servant had been engaged by another force, the Scions of Zaku, whose late leader Heskel had prophesied their return when it was time to die. After clearing the bridge of any antagonists, the commander and Scourge were approached by the disembodied spirit of Revan, who had been guiding Scourge to stop the Emperor's imminent rebirth, though he thought to have become one with the Force years before on Yavin 4. Revan explained he could not rest until he knew Vitiate's spirit was banished forever into the bowels of chaos, and warned that Vitiate was using his possessed victims to remake himself. With the ship disabled, Kira rejoined the commander and Scourge in the medical bay, where they ended up confronting the leader of both the servants and Scions, the latter of whom was killed by the former. After dispatching the servant leader, Kira found that while Satele still lived, 2 of the possessed Jedi were dead, and the others knocking on death's door. As planned, Kira connected to the others via the Force to enter Satele's mind, where they encountered all 3 of the Emperor's first known geysers. First Valkorion, Immortal Emperor of Zakuul, then Vitiate, Emperor of the Sith, and finally his original form of Tenebrae. Kira then came under the realization the ritual carved into Tenebrae's original body was not a plague, but an imprint, an echo of his original self, seeping through the very fabric of time. Tenebrae condemned the version of him that he knew as too complacent, distracted by various mortal concerns, empires, wars, in Vitiate's case, and even in Valkorion's case, a family, and he declared he would succeed where his original self had failed, and he was not as distracted as he once had been. The Vitiate form divided from the commander from their allies. However, they were soon joined by Revan, who stood with the commander against Tenebrae's shades, with his 2 greatest enemies fighting against the final form of the Emperor. With all 3 forms declaring themselves endless, infinite, they were confronted first by Mitra Surik, whom Tenebrae had mocked for her failure to kill him once before, and then by Scourge, who reminded him that he had saved the Emperor from her the first time, and would not do the same again. The Tenebrae form lashed out to separate the commander from the others. The commander then encountered the recently deceased Darth Maul, the Dark Councillor who had been murdered at the commander's side on Zakuul by Valkorion years prior. Maul explained that the new Tenebrae only had knowledge of his past deeds from the memories and impressions of Satele and her students, but he had garnered none of the wisdom and experience from those various encounters and altercations. Maul warned that he was not stopped now, there would not be another opportunity, and called upon the commander to finally break the chains he uses to ensnare us all. As if Tenebrae was not stopped, he would never be stopped. Finally, the commander reached the centre of the mindscape, a recreation of the Jedi Temple on Tython, although it was severely cracked and injured. Within, the Outlander discovered the meditating form of Satele Shan, delving deep into the Emperor's mind. They could feel the oppressive atmosphere weighing down upon him of Tenebrae's dark influence, an influence that was old, of an era long gone by. A 1,500-year-old dark side imprint was about to meet his match. The air was thick with the dark side of the Force. The walls themselves seemed to pulsate with malice. The commander knew that they were walking into a lion's death, but they steeled themselves for what was to come. The Jedi Master who had been missing for so long stood before them. The Emperor's first 3 forms had boasted that Satele would not be able to resist their power and domination for long, and that she would ultimately succumb to their will, being just another toy on Tenebrae's chessboard. She would be destroyed, leaving only Tenebrae, the Emperor, in control, as an all-powerful Force god. But Satele was not to be underestimated. As she awakened from the Emperor's grasp, she scoffed at Tenebrae's ego and arrogance, berating him for choosing to dominate not just one, but all of her students, as well as the Grand Master of the Jedi Order herself, just to prove that he was still powerful. Satele's words struck a nerve within the Emperor, and the anger grew even heavier as the battle between the two sides commenced. But then, an event that would define history occurred. The ghosts of all those whom Emperor had manipulated and killed over the centuries, led by Revan, then followed by Lord Scourge, Arkan, Valen, Senya, all of them began to manifest. Every Sith trooper whose wills he had dominated, every Sith Lord and Jedi who he had manipulated, every being that he had drained on those countless worlds he read of life. They stood behind the commander, united in the one goal, to end the immortal entity's reign of terror, once and for all. However, Tenebrae would not allow himself to go down. They all knew his true weakness, however, his pride and vanity, and its absolute fear of death. They had all fallen victim to his machinations, and now they were united in their desire to see him obliterated. Their presence lent strength to the commander and their allies, who fought with renewed vigour against the Emperor's many forms as he summoned a tempest of crackling crimson and lightning. Tenebrae's immense power, however, was not enough to save him, although it seemed like that in the initial, claiming that he was immortal, eternal, that he could not be denied, that he was endless. As he fought to hold on to his existence, the three geysers began to petrify and crumble into dust, just like his victims on Nathema and Zias had done in the past. The once invincible Emperor was no more, defeated by the united forces of all those whom he had wronged. The Emperor's reign for over the Empire was a long and tumultuous one, spanning over 1,300 years. His grip on his subjects was unrelenting, and he was not only viewed as a king, but as a god by his citizens of the Empire, the purest incarnation of the dark side. His influence was so strong and unwavering that most of his subjects were willing to lay down their lives in service to him. He was the source of many common phrases and utterances in imperial culture, such as "Glory to the Emperor," "Long live the Emperor," and "It's enough to wake the Emperor." The Emperor's power extended beyond the boundaries of the Empire, and even after his death, his legacy continued to inspire awe and fear. The citizens of the Eternal Empire, and after his death, revered Valkorion, the Emperor's alter ego, as a god. He had toppled the original religion of Zakur, and the subjects believed he was truly immortal, having guided the Eternal Empire to prosperity for centuries. It was not just the Emperor's power that left a lasting impression on the galaxy, it was also his quest for immortality. Darth Plagueis, a Sith Lord obsessed with achieving eternal life, mused that Vitiate, as he was known in history, was the only Sith Lord who had come close to unlocking the secret. The Empire's desire from eternal life drove him to extreme measures, with Tenebrae conducting brutal experimentations on Nathema and Zias, where he siphoned the life force of entire planets and ecosystems to sustain himself. His insatiable desire and hunger for power was further fueled by his pride and vanity, which ultimately led to his downfall. Almost from birth, the Emperor was unusual in that he seemed to lack emotion and empathy, something that would remain consistent throughout his life, regardless of the host body he would use. The child Tenebrae felt no affection for his mother, stepfather, or birth father, as he killed each of them without mercy or hesitation, and it was not long after his powers began to manifest that he discovered how to feed off the fear and suffering of those around him, gorging on their pain and agony. As a child, he was a cruel and utter dictator, massacring hundreds simply to satiate his hunger for anguish and extending his power. As a Sith Lord, Lord Vitiate became more known as more of a scholar than a warrior, as he spent much of his century-long rule over Nathema delving deep into the mysteries of the dark side, which ultimately would prove to make him the most powerful Sith Lord in galactic history. While other Sith became feared warriors and conquered new worlds for the glory of the Empire, Vitiate was content to remain on Nathema, even when the rest of the Sith Lords went to war against the Republic and followed either Naga Sadow or Luda Kresh. However, his public persona of a scholar was merely a sham, and by the time he had entered the second century of his lifetime, Vitiate was calculating, manipulative, and patient enough to sit by for hundreds of years while his plans took years to reach completion, and his machinations ensued. When news of Naga Sadow's defeat echoed through the ears of his people, Vitiate was able to carefully manipulate and coerce the rest of the Empire into an absolute frenzy of panic, and herd them as he wished. He also revealed his true persona to the 8,000 Sith Lords who heeded his call on anathema. The reclusive scholar crushed their minds and bound them to his own indomitable will, feeding and chiseling off their spirits for the centuries that followed in his millennium-long life. The ritual performed on anathema affected the Emperor beyond just his strength in the Force, which became greater than any other being in history. It is likely to assume that, aside from perhaps Darth Nihilus, Vitiate at this point possessed the greatest natural connection to the Force the galaxy had ever seen. His midichlorian count was already gargantuan, rivaling the likes of the Chosen One at 25 to 27,000, as he was able to complete great telekinetic and manipulative force feats with the dark side, basically being the dark side version of Grand Master Luke Skywalker. However, he then gorged himself on the life forces of two worlds, attaining power that I may believe maybe even surpass the potential of the Chosen One, not to mention he never entirely reached his full potential, and if he did, he would have been able to move stars, planets, anything he desired. However, the price of immortality meant that he no longer experienced any of the senses that normal people possess. Taste, touch, smell, colour, and even emotion were nothing to him, as he lacked the capacity to experience any of them. He did not care, however, as such mortal concerns were now beneath him, as he was now an emperor, no, not an emperor, a god, a pure incarnation of the darkness, the devil of Star Wars. His servant Lorm Scourge, whom he subjugated to a scientific recreation of his immortality ritual, came to realize during his 3 centuries of servant that the Sith ruler had transcended his humanity and mortality even within his own mind. The Emperor's sacrificed the ability to feel anything, separating and bisecting himself from the rest of the universe in the most fundamental ways, and convincing himself he was an all-powerful Force god, a nexus of the dark side, a wellspring of shadow. Later in life, his belief that he was above all things led him to a desire to escape from Sith teachings and doctrine, as well as the bonds of the Sith Empire that encased him and trapped him, and so he began anew in the unknown regions on Zakuul. In his search for a way to escape death completely, the one thing that remained that he truly feared, as he had garnered all this power. A quote from Revan explains it actually rather smoothly about Vitiate's fear of death, and utter fanaticism with trying to prevent it. For him, death is not merely the end. The Emperor had spent a millennium gathering his power. If he dies now, he will lose everything. Such is the way of the Sith. In his search for ways to completely escape death, his last true fear, the Emperor delved into many arcane and lost techniques of the dark side, including the forbidden technique of essence transfer, an ancient riddle and ritual pioneered by Darth Endedu, the immortal god king of Praketh who had held similar claims to Vitiate in terms of power, developing ways to link his consciousness through a hive mind with those of other beings. He soon gained a significant number of servants who were fanatically loyal to and intricately linked with their master, Emperor Vitiate. As the reach of his consciousness grew even greater, he became capable of dividing his focus among multiple agents of his will across the galaxy, while still maintaining complete possession of his current voice of Vitiate. Because of that capability, those who received audiences with the Emperor often gained the correct impression that the Sith was listening to other conversations even while speaking, due to the otherworldly echo that was emanating from his speech. The Emperor was determined not to die, regardless of the consequences to the rest of the galaxy. The Emperor who ruled the Sith Empire was motivated by only 2 emotions he could still feel after the anathemic ritual: the hunger for insatiable more power and his utter fear of losing it. Revan's subconscious manipulations of the Emperor while he was in prison further augmented the Sith's fear of death, pushing him to the point of irrationality and fueling his desire to become truly and utterly immortally Force God. As his spirit had been rendered immortal by the ritual, his perception in time and patience extended as well, something that allowed him to carefully and intricately and perceptively work towards his goals. The hopes, desires, and concerns of living beings meant nothing to him, and all other beings were his ants. His will was utter and absolute. If the Emperor's ritual had been completed over the entire galaxy, the Sith Lord would have spent eternity fulfilling any desire that he had. Over the course of his immortal life, he came to desire peace for the galaxy, but peace in the form of utter and complete emptiness. when he only briefly touched Scourge with a portion of his mind. The mental contact drove the Sith Lord nearly insane, despite it only lasting less than a second. Scourge's perception and perspective on the Emperor's mind was one filled with indescribable ancient horrors, with the emptiness of complete annihilation lurking beneath its surface, ready to bubble. When the hero of Tytha began to oppose him, the Emperor professed a lack of concern for the Knight's success against his agents. But over the course of his service, Scourge had come to recognize what little emotion remained in his master, and that the emotions that the Emperor was feeling were fear and hatred. Using the powers of Revan, as well as his Voss host, to peer into the future, the Emperor saw the possibility of his own death at the hands of the Jedi. That threat mortified the Immortal Sovereign, and he became more and more anxious to complete the Dark Ritual again, this time on the entire galaxy, to ensure his perpetual survival. But the hero was ultimately able to strike down the Emperor in a battle just as he and Lord Scourge had foreseen. However, curiously, the Emperor's personality as Immortal Emperor Valkorion was remarkably different. While still relatively emotionless and supremely confident in his actions, Valkorion experienced a degree of fondness for Senua Tirau, and the two were quite happy for a time before his sons, Arcan and Thexan, were born. Valkorion retained his near-universal indifference even with his children, expressing no affection from them other than designating Valen, the most dangerous and powerful of the three, his favourite, although he repeatedly expressed contempt for the violator behaviour exhibited by her and her brother Arcan, describing it as a brutish and a brute's way of fighting. Valkorion also showed no concern at the prospect of losing his children, displaying no reaction upon the death of Thexan, and using Valen's death to his advantage by consuming her spirit and mutating her into his puppet. He even encouraged the Outlander to try to kill Arcan on more than one occasion. During his observation of the galaxy during the Galactic War, the Emperor became intrigued by an individual who would eventually become known as the Outlander. After the invasion of Zyos, the Emperor returned entirely to his Valkorion guise and dedicated himself to ruling the Eternal Empire, judging that the Sith Empire was not worth saving, and that the Jedi and the Republic unworthy of their annihilation. But even then had machinations when the Outlander was brought before him. He offered to share his power, believing that the Outlander was unique in the way that they affected the galaxy, wherever they acted, just like he did. He expected Arcan's betrayal and used it to his advantage, transferring his power and consciousness into the Outlander's body. However, this entire video I've discussed about Tenebrae's power and his immense connection to the Force. Now, we are going to briefly dive into the full extent of Tenebrae's power, influence, and utter domination and strength in the dark side of the Force. Rivaled only by the likes of Crate, Nihilus, and Sidious, Tenebrae became a literal god.
I can't sense the others. I'm not sure if they made it in.
Unexpected guests. Fascinating. Who are you?
You don't recognize me?
No, but you have come here on purpose. Who else could you be? I've heard so much about you. Impressive.
Most impressive.
What the?
My wayward child. You of all people should know better than to challenge my strength.
Also, I've gathered from this Jedi's memories. Your minds are resilient, to say the least. Adapting so quickly. Resisting so ably.
We've done this whole it's all a dream but not really dance before. You don't remember?
This Jedi remembers, though she clearly lacks details.
You aren't who you're pretending to be.
I am, and I am not.
Are you gonna start making sense anytime soon? I'm on a tight schedule.
rushing ignorantly toward your doom. The galaxy never changes.
This is the body Scourge and I destroyed. His original body, Tenebrae. The ritual carved into him isn't a plague. It's an imprint. An echo of who he was back then.
It has taken longer than I'd hoped to recompose myself.
But time has never been in short supply. Not for me.
To be honest, I've quite enjoyed the process. The memories this Jedi and her followers have of me, of us. Quite amusing.
You won't hurt her or anyone else ever again.
So confident. You clearly don't know me as well as you think. The version of me that you knew became too complacent, too distracted by mortal concerns, empires, wars, even a family. I have seen where that path led. I'm not so easily distracted now. I will succeed where he failed. And thanks to you, I have a choice of interesting bodies to carry me to victory. You lash out with such conviction. Don't you see how pointless it all is?
I control this place. All that happens, every motion occurs by my design.
And you are no different.
You cannot succeed, only die alone.
In the fight against you, no one is alone. He divided us. He knows that together, we are stronger than he can ever hope to be.
If this really is Satil's mind, it looks like he's close to taking over completely.
Perhaps. But our enemy lies as often as he kills. We can still win. No one person can destroy this threat. But all of us together, we will end him. We'll find Satil and the others at the center of all this. Come on!
I told you.
Total Battle. Play now for free.
Hola, I'm Marivat, founder of The Mujerista. With the help of Squarespace, I launched a digital publication and platform built to empower Latinas to explore their identities and tell their stories while proudly representing their cultura. After 5 years of thoughtful storytelling on Squarespace, we're using their memberships tool to build a place for the Mujerista community to connect, attend virtual events, and find resources to shape and build an equitable future for the next generation of Latinas.
I control all that happens here.
I am immortal, infinite, endless.
Everything ends. Even you.
I believe you tried to destroy me once before. You failed.
I saved you then. I will not save you now.
Fools!
He thinks you will be lost here forever. But you have always known the way to destroy him. Together, we will find his doom. Satil is stronger than this. Duplicate believes. She is not the easy prey he assumes. He gleans the facts of his other lives from the memories and impressions of Satil and her students. But he has only the knowledge of those events. This Tenebrae possesses none of the wisdom earned by experiencing them.
You seem to know a lot about what's going on.
I know only what you know. Do not share in his arrogance. He is more vulnerable than he would have us believe. But he is still the most dangerous being in the galaxy. If we fail to destroy him here and now, there may never be another opportunity. He is a relic of an era long past. Destroy him. Break the chains he uses to ensnare us all. Free the galaxy from his manipulations. Avenge me. Avenge us all.
At last, I understand.
So desperate for love. For approval. For self-determination.
Each more powerful than the last. And also easily manipulated. You must have been endlessly entertaining.
Ignore him. We're together.
Brother. Sister. We know. Brother.
We know what? That he's just as deluded and self-absorbed as our parents. You couldn't let me be free. You were so afraid to let me be what I am, you killed me. I wouldn't even be here if she hadn't dragged me along.
Dragged you along? What do you mean?
Not one clue what you're doing. As always.
Valen, please.
Please? Please what, Mother? Please stop reminding you of the truth. Does it hurt? Because it pales next to what you did to me.
Please listen to me, Valen. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but you deserve to hear this. I was wrong. He took you, and I said nothing. He caged you, and I stood by. He robbed you of the woman you were destined to be, but I let it happen. Others blame you for so much, but the fault is mine. How much pain and suffering might not have happened if I had just fought harder for you? I could have done more. I should have done more.
Touching, but that's enough.
Finally something we agree on. Can we focus? There's someone else here who needs to die.
Foolish child. You could never hope to.
You presume limits to my power. There are none.
You must reach the center. Go.
What could you possibly be thinking?
You must realize by now that everything you do here is meaningless. The Jedi's mind can no longer resist me. It crumbles by the second.
When she is obliterated, only I will remain.
Watch, fight, flee, bring as many friends as you like. Nothing can stop me now.
You're wrong. I can stop you.
Ugh, foolish child.
Look at them. Your Jedi and her weak-minded students. Barely clinging to life, to sanity.
They will fall. And once again, I will rise.
No. Your power is your weakness. It blinds you.
Jedi nonsense.
Precisely. My students and I, who are we to resist your power? You knew you could dominate us all. That you could tear a path through our minds, absorbing our essence, strengthening yourself, crashing through all our defenses one by one. In time, your victory was inevitable. In time, you would claw your way here, into the very core of my being. Into the heart of my trap.
Trap. Look around you.
Yes, look around me. Look at my students, each of them shaken to their core by the death and chaos that you helped create. Eager for help, guidance, strength. Had you focused on any one of them, you might have succeeded. But your ego wouldn't allow it. Why settle for one student when you could assault them all? And why limit yourself to the students when their master was close at hand? I never needed to beat you. I only had to let you think you were invincible. Until now. Until every person who knows your weakness firsthand could come to face you. Until the one person who proved you could be defeated came here to destroy you, once and for all.
I command the force that binds the universe. How can a mere soldier hope to challenge me?
I'll win the same way I always do, as part of a team.
Enough! You will all learn the true depths of my power.
You think you know me?
You will suffer. I cannot be denied.
I am immortal.
Everything you've done.
Everyone you've betrayed.
Everyone you've manipulated.
Everyone you've murdered.
The Force seeks balance. Always.
No. No!
The Force is mine. I command it.
I am endless!
No. In the end, you're nothing.
When he was a young boy, even from infancy, the Sith Emperor, known then as Sith Pureblood Tenebrae, displayed an unprecedented affinity and natural innate capabilities with the Force. It was at the young tender age of 6 when his abilities first began to manifest, and he wasted no time in utilising them to satisfy his cruel desires. Tenebrae, driven by his insatiable thirst for power, and after seeing an argument between his stepfather and mother, snapped his adoptive stepfather's neck with a mere thought, displaying immense potential and a lack of empathy that would only grow with time. But that was just the beginning. Tenebrae continued to hone his powers and induce unprecedented amounts of pain on those around him, gorging himself on their suffering. His own mother was subjugated to months of personal torture as he fed off her fear and suffering, reveling in the agony he caused. As he grew even more powerful, Tenebrae's reign of terror escalated as he began to engage in various public executions, using the pain and terror of his victims to fuel his ever-expanding archive of knowledge and power. Even the most powerful of Sith Lords had reason to fear Tenebrae. At the age of 6, he confronted his real father, the Sith Lord Drummer, and proved that he was a force to be reckoned with. Tenebrae, after being insulted by the man, stripped his father of both his sanity and his powers in the Force, demonstrating his ruthlessness that was unprecedented in the Sith Order, and rivaled only by Tula Cord and the emotionalness of others. Tenebrae, later known as Lord Vitiate, was a prodigious Force user, whose powers were already evident at a young age. He was so powerful that he managed to torture many inhabitants of the planet he was on. He revelled in public executions, using his Force abilities to amplify the agony of his victims and feed on their fear. His cruelty and power soon attracted the attention of current Dark Lord of the Sith and Sovereign of the Sith Council, Marka Ragnos, who bestowed upon him the title of Lord Vitiate at the tender age of 13, after conquering his entire homeworld and slaying Lord Drama. Despite his youth, Vitiate quickly gained a reputation as a scholar of the dark side, spending the next century studying ancient incantations of Sith sorcery and immersing himself into the innermost intricacies of the Force. He became one of the most powerful practitioners of Sith rituals, magic, and alchemy in history, rivaled only by Anderdu and Treya. Devising complex rituals to warp reality and life itself, Vitiate's speciality was the domination of his opponent's mind, proving to be far more powerful with this ability than Palpatine ever was, as he was able to dominate the minds of 8,000 fellow Sith Lords and bind them with his will, forcing them to participate in the ritual of Nathema, the most horrifying and powerful Sith ritual ever conducted. Using the power of these insane Sith Lords, Vitiate performed the most complex ritual of Sith magic ever attempted with the Age of the Entity Zildrog. He tore the Force from the entire planet of Nathema, a world whose inhabitants had long been racked by war and suffering, and then absorbed the combined life force of every living thing on the surface, including those who had died in the ritual. Some, like Lord Scourge, the First Emperor's Wrath, even concurred with the fact that Vitiate was able to feed on their spirits to sustain his own life force for the centuries to come across his millennia-long lifespan. But Vitiate's power was not without its limitations. At one point, he was coerced into a trap by Darth Barris, a member of the Dark Council, who sought to control the Emperor's body through the dark side entity known as Selmak. Despite the powerful entity's overwhelming attempts to take control, Vitiate was able to fend off its influence and retain his own will. instilling upon the galaxy a new dark reign. During his long reign as Emperor, Vitiate delved even deeper into the dark side's ancient techniques, seeking to garner even more power and knowledge. He experimented with lost powers and rituals, constantly pushing the boundaries of what he assumed was possible. Despite the physical toll this took on his body, he continued to grow stronger and more powerful. Through the previously undiscovered technique of transfer essences pioneered by Darth Dedu many years prior, he was able to extend his life indefinitely, moving his consciousness from body to body, and sustaining himself through the power of the dark side itself. But Vitiate's reach psychologically went just beyond his own body. Through a combination of force techniques, he was able to imbue various portions of his consciousness into infants, creating what would later become known as the Children of the Emperor. These children became extensions of his will, able to act as a covert operatives and be possessed like puppets. Vitiate could suppress their personas and their force sensitivity, making them the ultimate spies and tools of his dark power, with Kira Carson being one, literally invading the Jedi Order itself, with neither the Outlander nor Grandmaster Satele Shan being able to sense her presence. Vitiate's mind control powers were so strong that even the wills of formidable Jedi such as Revan and Malak could not resist his influence. He was a master of manipulation, deception, using his vast knowledge of the Force to bend others to his will and achieve his own ends. However, over the centuries, he became more and more isolated, focusing solely on his own power and the domination of all life in the galaxy to fuel a new ritual. But even as his physical body decayed and his mind grew more twisted, his dark power remained. The Emperor's influence on the planet of Droman Castle was so significant that the very atmosphere was warped, twisted, and mutated. His potent rituals on the planet warped the planet's very atmosphere, managing it to perpetual dangerous lightning storms that crackled with violator energy. He displayed formidable mastery over telekinesis, an array of defensive techniques, erecting impregnable force barriers that withstood the searing flames of T3M4's flamethrower, and the ferocious strikes of his own son, Arkan's lightsaber. The Emperor's telekinetic dexterity was on unprecedented magnitude. He was able to execute colossal displays of raw power without using customary hand gestures with effortless ease. He was able to effortlessly hurl Revan across his throne room and decimate the astromech droid T3M4 to mere shrapnel with a mere thought. The Emperor was also capable of utilizing telekinesis in combat, as he effortlessly toyed with the combined might of the Outlander, Valen, and Arkan in the Outlander's own psyche. He was extremely powerful in telekinesis, being able to lift entire ships from the very bowels of chaos. Vitiate's will was so strong that he was able to stop 1.5 million ships and planets from falling into the depths of chaos, a feat that we have never seen replicated. He was also a masterful and expert wielder of force lightning, unleashing vicious bolts of crackling energy with alarming precision, and summoning cataclysmic force storms with enough force to vanquish Revan's defensive Tutor Minas and leave him grievously wounded. The Emperor summoned potent Sith magic, enabling him to conjure phantasmal copies of himself to confound the hero of Typhon. In combat, the Emperor drew upon his scarlet-bladed lightsaber, showcasing considerable proficiency despite its overwhelming power that rendered it largely redundant to him. The Emperor's lightning could adopt a variety of hues, being capable of summoning purple and crimson hues of lightning alike. The Emperor was also proficient in more arcane abilities such as Force Drain and Sever, which he used to rip the Force from Nefema and later Zyos. During his first few centuries as Emperor, a conspiracy formed in the Dark Council headed by Darth Locus. The Dark Councillors, when they arrived at the steps on the Imperial Citadel, were killed almost instantly in a flash of light. Locus then disappeared thereafter mysteriously, never to be seen again. Tenebrae was even able to project his spirit from across the galaxy, possessing an entire planet and annihilating it, utilizing the ability of teleportation within the very Force itself. Overall, Vitiate is, in my personal opinion, the most powerful Darksider to have ever existed, surpassing both Nihilus, Sidious, and Crate. At the time, Vitiate was considered to be the most powerful Force user by both the Jedi and the Sith in galactic history. Anyway, my friends, that subtly brings us to the very end of this documentary on Eternal Emperor Valkorion. Tell me if you'd like to see more of these, and share this video with your friends. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and summon the Force into yourself. if you wish to become nearly as powerful as Emperor Vitiate. Farewell, my friends. I'll see you in a galaxy far, far away. And remember, a god has no family.